Executive Director of Finance and Operations, Scott Lesage, and Dr. Ray Queener from TeamWorks, who has served as the consultant that has worked for us, with us throughout this process along with his team. So the goal of this presentation is to take you through a number of PowerPoint slides and share some background information in regard to the process. We'll walk through the specific component parts of the recommendation. You should have some awareness of that, obviously, by now. We've provided some materials that are on your electronic board packet that's been available to you. And you'll see a lot of the component parts of the PowerPoint obviously aligning with the written packet that has been provided to you. So do we have a slide advancer here? So this is a general overview of the agenda before I turn it over to Dr. Queener to take us through several of the first slides. First of all, a process update, some themes from the round 4 of input. So we had, as I think you're all aware, 4 input team meetings that convened a group of about, I think, 80 individuals, representation from the staff and parent communities from each one of our school sites. And the development of Concept 9, which is what's brought before you here this evening as the culminating package, so to speak, from those months of work. Several considerations were given during the concept development, so we'll share a little bit in regard to that, the concept recommendation, some benefits, challenges, next steps, and then give you an opportunity to ask questions if you have any following the presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Queener, and he'll take a number of the slides, and the three of us will be involved in sharing the information. I might also just point out that we have Jen Welk, who's another member of our finance and operations team here this evening, seated behind me and to my left, and we may call on her a time or two for some responses as well. So with that, Ray, if you would.
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to be with you again. What I thought we would first do is just bring you back up to speed from where we were a week and 2 days ago, what's happened since then. Again, we started this whole process with a guiding change document, and the goal was to move from the why to the desired outcomes and try to achieve them as best as possible. And so they were always in the forefront of all the work that we were doing with the design team and the input team. And again, striving to accomplish all of them and making progress, while admittedly, as we talked about several times, it's hard to get 100% there with everything. So since, oh, sorry, I took your slide, Scott.
No, absolutely. Thank you, members of the board. Just to talk about, Dr. Anderson hit on it a little bit, but this has been a collaborative and transparent process. As you know, this is a challenging process, which we pointed out. As it impacts students and families, we approach this effort with a strong commitment to transparency and fairness. And listed here, and it's been mentioned at several of the board meetings as well, but we had a design team of 28 district leaders that met over 13 times and dedicated significant time even outside of those to work on this process. We had an input team of nearly 80 members that included staff and parents that engaged in 3 focused meetings that we received feedback from as well. The district partnered with a third party, sitting to my left here, TeamWorks, Dr. Queener, to provide structure, data, and facilitation. And then we had regular communication that was maintained with our community. We had a dedicated website and feedback portal that was created to share information and gather input. And the process included multiple updates to the school board to ensure transparency. We conducted several rounds of feedback on different concepts with both the public and the input team, incorporating changes based on the feedback received. I think I would just add that all feedback was considered, but not every requested or suggested change could be implemented. Dr. Anderson kind of alluded to that, but it is kind of, we can't have a perfect scenario that works out in every situation. And we absolutely understand that this can be a very challenging endeavor as it impacts students and families. As we've learned along the way, it's a very complex process, and we recognize it will result in someone moving. If no one was to relocate to different schools, we would not have tackled the tasks that we were set out to achieve.
So last week I was with you and we talked about concept 8B5. And since that time, that was posted on the website, solicited for feedback. That ran for a couple of days. And we did theme that feedback as well as provide all the raw comments to the administration. They've reviewed that and through several small group meetings have incorporated what they were able to. There was also additional feedback from the middle school principals. The reason this is important is you'll remember that at one point in the process, we shifted to just focusing on the elementaries first. When we received the strong feedback that the desire was to try to achieve a pure elementary feeder system, we needed to focus that first and then work with the middle school. So the final iterations, which impacted middle schools, was Dr. Anderson and Scott met with them and talked with them to make sure that what was being put forth was in line with their expectations. The input that we received last week, we had about 309 responses. It was one open response box, and so we didn't follow the same pattern before, strengths and concerns and refinements. We just were asking for feedback on the one proposal. All of that information has been posted to the website, the themes that were shared. And again, all the detailed comments were shared with the administration. So I know you've had a chance to review these as well. There were 10 themes that we utilized artificial intelligence to help us categorize. And you can see number one, neighborhood unity. That was no change from what we've heard in the past on previous comments, try to keep neighborhoods together as best as possible. There were some comments around capacity issues, making sure that we can try to create a scenario that's going to last as long as possible. I think Dr. Anderson has mentioned that the goal was to try to have a plan that's going to last 3 to 5 years. And we always put an asterisk by that because what's really driving the variability is development and growth. And as a growing district, it's just, that's hard to predict, but that was always the target, was trying to get to that 3 to 5 years. Transportation efficiency, so again, we were looking at this all throughout the process of trying to make sure that we were being as efficient as possible. And as I mentioned last week, there was progress made in improving that, albeit with pocket boundaries that are in the current model. You have some inefficiencies, but significant improvement was made in that area. As expected, I think parents and families are concerned about the social emotional well-being of their children. And we know as educators that any transition is hard. And so I think parents are reflecting that in these comments as well. Equity and fairness, comments made about kind of how we got from 8B-2 to 8B-5. And so there was some questions as to why changes were being made as we continue to evolve this. And so that was several comments. Again, families looking for consistency and stability, and trying to strive for the same things that I think we were, is try to have these boundaries set in place for as long as possible. Planning and rationale, transparency. I think every time we have a new concept or a new model, there's changes. And so those that are in areas that are in the final changes, they express concern that they haven't had an opportunity throughout all the process to maybe weigh in as much as others have. And it's typical in the process as you're making these changes and movements to have this point, but there were comments made along that as well. Impact of future developments, so trying to express that stable developments are protected, but the new developments would be prioritized for any kind of moves. And the team did look at this over time. And again, trying to balance all the variables is what they were focused on. And then minimizing disruption, I think we did make great progress. From the very first model, I think was 20% of students projected to move, and I think we're down to 8%. So we really did work to try to minimize disruption. And as Scott just mentioned, without anybody moving, we would not have achieved some of the challenges that you're faced with today with current capacities. And the proximity to schools, again, we did move away from 8A, which was the contiguous boundaries. It moved more kids. That would have provided more proximity, but in Concept 9, you're going to see that there's still some pocket boundaries, and you're going to see some adjustments that aren't necessarily as close to the schools as we would have desired. So, and we got those comments from the public. And again, I shared this slide. The capacities really started the whole conversation, trying to balance capacities across the district. When we reviewed the current reality report that we looked at 3 times, we have made progress in the design team has made progress in this work, trying to get to that 90% functional capacity. If we're talking about 2 years, it's easy to make adjustments. If you're talking about the next 2 to 3 years beyond that, it's harder because we don't know how development's really going to happen and how fast. But that was our target goal. Demographic awareness, we were cognizant of that throughout the process. Every model we looked at the profile of current students. If we applied a new model to it, what it would look like in that school. Trying to maintain neighborhood schools as much as possible. Working to keep developments in neighborhoods together. And again, we've heard very strongly that the desire to have pure elementary feeders in the middle schools was important. Neighborhood proximity to schools I mentioned already. The major roadways were a consideration. It was very helpful to have the transportation person as part of the whole conversation so they could bring that perspective. Consideration of prior boundary adjustments. Again, that was a constant theme that was talked about. And again, the focus of trying to get to 3 to 5 years as best as possible.
So I'll take you through a few slides that highlight what our recommendation is to you here tonight. Before I start that, though, I just will give a little bit of historical background. So I'm in my 17th year as superintendent here in Wayzata. When I started in 2008, we had 9,600 students in grades K through 12. And this year we have, I believe, about 12,800 and rising a little bit each day, I believe. But it's really grown quite a lot. And I kind of remember back at that time hearing that there wasn't really a perspective that the community was going to be growing and that there would be a lot of construction. Well, since that time, we've built 2 new elementary schools, a new early learning school. We've added on a significant expansion to our high school. We've built on classrooms at our elementary, and also a couple of our middle schools. We've added some additional classroom spaces. And we've also invested heavily into our buildings to upgrade and refurbish, replace all the mechanical systems, lighting, all of those types of HVAC, all the things that we do in our homes as well, because we have to maintain and keep those in good order. So we really have had a focus on our facilities and getting our arms around this growth. And within 5 years, we opened 2 elementary schools, Meadow Ridge in, I think, 2015, and Northwoods in 2020, which I think was the same year or thereabouts that we opened up the early learning school. So we have really been on an accelerated pace to accommodate our growth. And with that comes the need to take a look at where are our students residing and where are they located within the community in proximity to our schools, and then give consideration to what the projected enrollment growth is into the future. So within the community, most of our, well, I don't know if I should say it quite that way, but a number of our communities are filling out. Plymouth has some limited space yet. The portion of Maple Grove that's in the Wayzata district still has some growth potential. But the other cities of our community to the east, southeast, south, maybe southwest are pretty well filled. But Corcoran is filling quickly, and Medina has a lot of wide open space. So I like to share in any group that I have an opportunity to that the school district does own property in Medina. It's about 82 or 83 acres that would be large enough at some point for an elementary school and a middle school. We've had a few questions along the way about why don't we just build another school, and when will that happen? How long does it take to do that? So those are questions that I oftentimes get when I'm at PTA meetings or our district liaison meetings or other community meetings that I might be at. And prior to being able to move forward and build new schools, it's important for a school district to maximize existing resources. And as we'd all know in the room, communities evolve and grow and change over a period of time in somewhat unpredictable ways. So we have some areas of our community that are growing very rapidly. We have other areas of our community that have not yet broken ground on new development. We have a number of houses that do not have school-age children in them that we anticipate at some point, possibly in the coming X number of years. I don't know how long that might be. It's really hard to predict. Where some of those homes will become available to young families again, more in the east southeast part of the school district. So, giving consideration to maintaining some space in those areas and pockets through this process was important as well. And also recognizing that we can anticipate in the next decade or 15 years quite a lot of expansion in Medina and filling up in the Corcoran community and bringing more students to us. So as I said before, we have 12,800 K-12 students in our district this year. Almost every year now is an all-time high, and we can anticipate that we're going to be back into some type of a significant growth pattern. For many years, that was about 250 new K-12 students a year, and I think we're probably going to be heading back into something on that type of a growth level. So I just wanted to give a little bit of that background because that's the journey we've been on for 16 plus years now. And it's been pretty robust growth. That's a little bit unique in suburban areas. Not all suburban communities are growing, but we are. So this is part of the process. If we were a fully grown out school district, if that's the right way to say it, we probably would be hitting some type of equilibrium. So the number of fifth graders that graduate, so to speak, somewhat approximates the incoming freshman or kindergarten, and you kind of get into that, but we're a number of years away from that. So again, that's what precipitates this type of a process. I spent 15 years or 16 years in another district before I came here. During that time, we never once changed attendance areas, and I think they had 5 elementary schools and 2 middle schools. So they were fully grown out, and there just wasn't this dynamic growth. So I thought it would be important just to kind of share that context. I think most of our board members are familiar with that historical perspective, but perhaps not all of our guests here tonight have heard quite that type of overview. So I think it helps paint a picture about our community as to where we're at and where I think we're headed. So the map that's on the screen here is what we've come to call Concept 9 for obvious reasons. We worked our way through 8 different concepts and varieties of those concepts and have presented this here. So this is what would have been sent out to our families and our staff with the Concept 9 packet that went out a day or two ago, I think. And I wanted to take some time and walk through some of the narrative or the component parts. So we thought it would be important to just highlight the specific areas or neighborhoods that are impacted by the change. There's quite a number of them, so bear with me. But I think it's important to have these up here and to make mention to them. So the first one is an area north of Highway 55 between Pinto Drive and Medina Entertainment Center. And they will be moving to Northwoods in this model and Central Middle School from Greenwood and West Middle School. There's an area south of 394 and east of 494 and west of Plymouth Road. I'm sure you can all envision that perfectly where that is. There's a number of neighborhoods that are included there. They're relatively smaller than perhaps some of them that would be up on the northwest part of the community. And those students with this proposal would move to Birchview and Central Middle School from Sunset Hill and East Middle School. I could probably, well, I just will read through that list. So the list is Birdsong, Briarcliff, Crown Hill, Dalmatian Ridge, Emerald Ridge, Enghausers, Beaverdale, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Emerald Woods, Essex Hills, Fairfield Acres, Hammer Estates, Hill Ridge, Lawrence Woods, Oakland Knoll, Oakland Estates, Oak Woods, Plattwood, Preston Woods, Stone Road, Western S, White Birch Hills, and Woodhaven. And then the next neighborhood is the Cimarron Ponds, which in this proposal would move to Birchview and Central Middle School from Gleason Lake and from Gleason Lake and West Middle School. Cranberry Ridge moved to Kimberly Lane, Central Middle School from Greenwood and West Middle School. Elm Creek Highlands would move from Kimberly Lane in Central Middle School to Kimberly Lane Central Middle School from Greenwood and West Middle School. Marsh Point, all students will now go to Greenwood and West Middle School. It was a split neighborhood at Gleason Lake and West Middle School, along with Greenwood and West Middle School. So we've, over the years, had a strategy that has actually worked pretty well for us as we continue to grow. And neighborhoods that are located within a specific school attendance area open up new sections of a development, or an entirely new development perhaps might open up. We've had a practice of identifying those new developments. It's possible some folks here in the room might have been in one of those developments, and we use transportation systems to bring those students to our buildings further south that have capacity. And as we continue to bring students to those schools in that fashion, and as time has evolved and we built Meadow Ridge, and then we built Northwoods, we take a look at that and then try to reconfigure those neighborhoods or areas around those schools. I could envision that that type of a practice would be put in place again at such time if we were to move forward and build elementary number 10. As all the board members know, we have not yet taken any formal action on that. It's very early in preliminary strategizing and going through this process that we're talking about tonight with enrollment projections and making determinations for establishing school attendance areas. We've had some questions too about why only 3 to 5 years. I can understand why community members might feel that that's a very short timeline or being short-sighted. When you get out beyond 5 years with enrollment projections in K-12 schools, it's really difficult because we have no idea how quickly developments are going to open, other than what city governments might tell us or what builders might tell us. And it's also somewhat at the mercy of the economy, interest rates, any other number of variables or factors that can have an impact on the rate of building new single-family homes or homes within the community. The next neighborhood, and I want to share that a little bit about those pocket neighborhoods because it's been a really effective strategy for us. I don't know if that's the best name for it. I think that's kind of what we started calling them, but it kind of makes sense, and it has worked pretty well for us. But I wanted to share that because these were the first set of schools that were indicating that they were split between those two packages of elementary and middle schools. I wanted to explain that to the group. Medina Clydesdale Townhomes moved to Northwood Central Middle School from Greenwood and West Middle School. Ravinia, all students will now go to Northwood Central Middle School. It was one of those split neighborhoods, pocket neighborhoods, so to speak, at Oakwood and Northwoods, and Central Middle School and West Middle School. Reserve at Medina, this proposal would have them moving to Northwoods and Central Middle School from Greenwood and West Middle School. Tavera, all students will now go to Kimberly Lane under this model and Central Middle School. This again was one of those split neighborhoods that utilized an Oakwood West Middle School package and a Northwoods Central Middle School package. Villas at Medina moved to Northwoods and Central Middle School from Greenwood and West Middle School. Walcott Glen, all students will now go to Northwoods and Central Middle School. This again was a split neighborhood at Oakwood and West, and Northwoods and Central. Weston Ridge moved to Meadow Ridge and Central Middle School from Northwoods and Central Middle School. So keeping the same middle school there with that move. Weston Woods, all students would now go to Greenwood and West Middle School. That was a split neighborhood where students went to Gleason Lake and West and Greenwood and West. Woods of Medina, all students would go to Northwoods and Central Middle School. This again was a split neighborhood, Gleason Lake and West Middle School with Greenwood and West Middle School. And finally, two other neighborhoods that are in the southeast part of our community, our school community, is Zanzibar would move to Birchfield Central Middle School from Gleason Lake and West Middle School. And I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that. Zinal, I believe, would move to Birchview Central Middle School from Gleason Lake and West Middle School. So that's kind of a long list. And at some point when we get to the action item, I'll probably read through those again just to be sure we cover for completeness. But you can see we have a lot of neighborhoods that are impacted. They vary in size from relatively smaller to pretty significant sized developments. This was also referenced by Ray earlier in his introductory comments, but there was a real clear set of communications coming to us from the community about we really like the feeder school program. So we've had split elementary schools before to two different middle schools. Oakwood, I know when I came here, I actually was split between Central Middle School and West Middle School. I can't recall this one, but I've heard that Plymouth Creek and/or Kimberly Lane had been split to two different middle schools. I think that must be before my time here, but it's possible that that actually was in place, and I've lost track of that after building all those new buildings that I mentioned before. But anyway, it's a model that our community has really liked. So we have found a way to go back to that feeder school model with this, which I think will be and has been well received by the community. 3 feeder schools to West, which is what their current model is, Gleason Lake, Greenwood, and Oakwood. 4 schools to Central Middle School, Birchview, Kimberly Lane, Meadow Ridge, and Northwoods. And then back to 2 schools at East Middle School, Plymouth Creek and Sunset Hill. So we had, for a number of years, what I call a 2-5-2 model. 2 elementaries went to West, 5 went to Central, and 2 went to East Middle School. This year, we felt that we would have the capacity and maybe the creativity to do a 3-3-3 model, where we'd have 3 elementaries go to each one of our 3 middle schools. That works from a capacity perspective very well at Central, because they have more space there. It's former high school, so that makes sense. But it was really tightening up at West, but it's more manageable there than at East. And East really is a tight building. Schools that were constructed some time ago were designed differently back in a day when classrooms were more configured or arranged with, what I experienced as well. More rows of students. You don't need as much interactive, collaborative space, so the design of middle schools have really changed. So the model that we're proposing is to go to, I guess, what we could call a 3-4-2 model, where there would be 3 feeder schools to West, which would include those that are listed, 4 feeder schools to Central Middle School, and then 2 to East Middle School. And some have asked, what will we do at West? Because if it's already kind of tight, what are the plans to kind of help accommodate that number of students? Because it could grow to 900 to 1,000 students. Currently, I think they have around 800. They're 750 to 800. But we have the ability to expand classroom space there. There's, I think, about 13,000 square feet of underutilized and or unused old locker room space that we believe we can convert into classrooms, and we're making plans to do that. It'll be the fall of 2026 before those classrooms will be available, but we think that that's a really good investment for the long haul for the district, because additional capacity is on the west side of town, which is where we anticipate the growth is going to be. And that, along with any possible future middle school building in that space that I spoke about before, the property that we own in Medina. Um, would, I don't know, knock on wood, I don't know if this is wood or not, I don't think it is, but the new middle school and this additional space at West hopefully would accommodate what we might anticipate for middle school age student growth uh, before we hit that equilibrium point. I don't know. We'll have to see how all that evolves in the next 15 or 20 years. But anyway, I wanted to explain a little bit about why we feel we can make this work at West Middle School, because I know some of you have had that question. Ryan Carlson, the principal there, is very confident that this could work. He's excited about the possibility of those new classrooms being constructed, and looks forward to having full feeder schools, which I know our other two middle schools do too. The next slide, and you'll notice the header on this is just modifications to the concept 8B5. We put this one in here because there was an error. I think the numbers were calculating correctly, but the map didn't indicate that these two neighborhoods, which are kind of on 101 north of Oakwood and adjacent, not too far from Greenwood, they go to Gleason Lake, and they'll continue to be assigned to Gleason Lake. So I just wanted to point that out in the presentation as well. I wanted to share a little bit about some, I don't know, this could have a lot of different headers, but administrative and procedural considerations. So there's always a lot of operational things that we do in order to make things work well within each one of our buildings. I wanted to just mention open enrollment. We currently have open enrollment at all of our elementary and secondary buildings that are in accordance with school board policy and in alignment with state laws. It's probably important for those in attendance tonight to know we don't have that many open enrollment students anymore. When I came, we had, I don't know the exact percentage, but I'm pretty sure it would have been 15 to 20% of students that were open enrolled at the time. They have all, I don't know, for lack of a better term, aged out, graduated. Most of our open enrollment students, at least to that level of numbers, is not the case anymore. By state law, Minnesota law requires that you must make an equivalent number of seats to 1% at each grade level open to open enrollment. So for us, that's about 10 kids a class. So we meet that. I think all of our grade levels across the district probably have at least 10 students. As you recall, we did bring in a few 9th and 10th graders last year as part of our cost containment process, but they will be here 3 or 4 years and not be in that pipeline where our schools are growing. So I just wanted to emphasize that open enrollment students within our district is not creating a serious space crunch for us, because we don't have that many open enrollment students here. And we meet the statutory requirements for what we need to make available to parties outside of the district. When possible, we'll continue with the practice of same building placement of an open enrolled kindergarten student. So in other words, if a child has a 3rd grade brother or sister at an elementary school and they're entering kindergarten, we would do our best to make a priority to keep them at that building. If we can't keep them together at that building and that's important to the parent, we would look for a building with some space where we would at least offer that opportunity for them to have both children in the same space. Students enrolled in 24-25 under approved open enrollment agreements will continue attending the same schools as they're currently enrolled in. Because there are so few, we don't really see that there's much of a need to create a protocol for that, because each school, again, if you have 10 students per grade level, that's across 9 elementaries. That's about 1 child per elementary. Per grade level. So, maybe 6 kids, I guess, in each one of the buildings at the max. Open enrolled students moving into 6th grade will attend the middle school at their elementary school. We've utilized Birchview as our kind of centralized site for open enrollment students who don't necessarily have connections directly within the other buildings, and that has helped their student enrollment. That's in one of the neighborhoods where I referenced before that there could be a significant turnover of homes at some point with young families moving in. There's already been some of that, and we would anticipate that those areas in the southeast would begin to grow as well. Go ahead.
I might just add, just to build off of what Dr. Anderson said, roughly our K through 5, we have about 70 open enrolled students, just to give the breakdown of that for the impact across the district. 38 of those open enrollment students are at Birchview, to Dr. Anderson's point. 10 are at Sunset Hill. There's 8 each at Oakwood and Plymouth Creek. There's 2 at Meadow Ridge, 1 each at Northwoods and Kimberly Lane, and 0 at Greenwood. Just to add perspective to open enrollment, just to show it really isn't a big number.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate that. So then there's another term. Sometimes these two terms get intermixed, open enrollment and intra-district transfer. So open enrollment is a student that comes into our district from another school district. Intra-district transfer is a student who moves from building A to building B, and there's a process for that. There's a form on our website that parents can fill out if they have a request to make that they wish for their child to attend a different school within the district. We do consider those. They are not always approved. It's somewhat is contingent upon the class sizes in the building they wish to go to. Sometimes they want to move from a building that may have smaller class sizes to one that has larger ones. That probably would not be too likely, but there are occasions or times when they may be moving from a building that would be somewhat larger to a building that would have more capacity or space. So that's what an intra-district transfer is. And we've indicated here a few key points. We'll continue to utilize our current protocol for that, which is really the bullet point number 1. Number 2, intra-district transfer students may or may not be allowed to remain at their 24-25 school year. That's nothing new with this proposal. That's an annually reviewed protocol where each year students need to sign up. I think generally most students are probably in the same building for the duration, but we do give ourselves the opportunity to annually review that in case enrollment changes significantly in a given building for some reason. And then intra-district transfers for other elementary students will be limited due to space, logistical, and cost constraints, but those will be considered, and for families that fill one of those out and submit it, we will review those and give consideration to which one of those that we might be able to honor. Continued enrollment options for 6th grade students of the 24-25 school year attending East Middle School. You'll recall that we made that shift last year to move Kimberly Lane to East Middle School, Oakwood to West Middle School, and now Kimberly Lane will be going back to Central Middle School. And we wanted to create an opportunity for those students who started 6th grade at East to be able to continue their 7th and 8th grade year at East Middle School. The district would provide transportation for those students like they are this year if they wish to remain there, and we anticipate probably a good number of them will choose to do that. Middle school students at East Central and West will be allowed to remain at their current school of attendance through their 8th grade year. So this one's kind of a little bit of a different situation because that's more of a student choice on this to remain there, whereas with the Kimberly Lane to East Middle School, it was more of a district decision, and we want to continue to provide that transportation for those students that committed and probably want to stay there and finish their middle school years. The great thing about the Wayzata district, there are some challenges associated with having a single large high school, but there are lots of benefits as well. So all of our kids, regardless of their elementary and or middle schools, all end up at Wayzata High School, which provides such a great experience and opportunity there. Both of my own kids graduated from there, and we're very proud of both of them and pleased with the education that they received there. So with East Central and West, we will allow those students who may have been impacted by relocation to a different middle school by allowing them to finish. The transportation is a little tricky with that. Probably the bottom line is that we will not transport students to those middle schools. However, if they happen to be adjacent to or somewhat close to a bus stop that picks up children for that middle school that they wish to stay at, if a child or a student can walk to a bus stop and or get dropped off by a parent at a bus stop, they can hitch a ride all the way over to the school. So, and we do have kids that do that, and open enrollment kids are allowed to do that too. But again, we don't have a large number associated with our open enrollment program. Continuing on with that, younger elementary school siblings and middle school students will not have continued enrollment unless they're approved for an intra-district transfer process. I spoke at length about that prior to. they would need to attend the newly assigned middle school. Students, except for those referenced in the bullet points above, will be expected to attend their assigned school for 25-26 school year. And due to space limitations, some of the logistical and cost constraints, the current fourth grade students, we've had a few questions about, would they be allowed to remain at the elementary school for that final fifth grade year? We're starting at the point of indicating here that due to a few unknown constraints yet and what the space might be, we're starting at those will not be allowed. I spoke before about the intra-district transfer process. That's open to anybody. So for those who may have an interest in us considering and reviewing that, that would be a way for that to be considered. I think anytime you make changes like this, you continue to assess and give consideration to some of these operational things. And I think there would be some opportunities for us just to continue monitoring as we see what our student enrollment is doing and get students repositioned for the 25-26 school year. And then we'll be in a better position to try to make some decisions about reviewing these administrative protocols. So I just wanted to mention that as well. A couple other things, or three things that I just wanted to reference as well as part of this. When students move to a new elementary, I know the principals are great at trying to co-locate or have students coming from that former school into a new one, trying to cluster some kids from that same school into their classrooms when and where possible. So that'll be an operational thing that our principals and staff at the buildings will work on. Parents are also very interested in what about Wayzata kids enrollment. So that transfers to a new building. So if you're on the list and you're into the program, I think once you're in, you're in. That does not change. You don't lose that registration or that connection to Wayzata Kids program if you move to another school. And then our principals are great at planning transition activities. Our principals have been through this before. They're well trained and experienced. As I said before, we've grown over 3,000 students now in the last 16 years, and we have had to do this a few times. The changes we made have ranged from some minor administrative tweaks or changes to attendance areas, and all the way to more comprehensive reviews like this one. And when we opened up the two elementary schools, obviously you have to populate those schools. So you go through a major change during those times as well, or you have an empty school and everyone wonders why you built it. So there will be some wonderful school transition activities for new students, whether it's to elementary or middle school. And our principals, again, have a script with that. They work with their PTA and PTO. By script, I just mean a game plan. It's not literally a script, but they know how to put the welcome mat out and really make sure that students land on their feet in a very positive way. Some of the benefits and challenges, you can't go through a process like this where, there should be some benefits. Otherwise, why'd you do it? Because there were some challenges that we were facing as a district that we knew we needed to address now. And it's hard to hit on all of those original guiding principles to the highest degree possible. So that's where some of the challenges evolve or happen in protocols or processes like this. So some of the things that this package would accomplish, it addresses schools that are at or over capacity. We did work toward minimizing the number of students and families impacted. I'll take this opportunity just to acknowledge and state how much I know it is challenging to make change and to move from school A to school B. And again, my own family has done that. We've worked with in our school district community to populate new buildings, right-sized buildings with enrollment. So I do want to acknowledge that I know that anxiety about uncertainty and transition and all of the what ifs, they're real, and I get that. And we've experienced that with our own family. So I know what that feels like. I think there can also be some great learning in that as well, not to make an effort to sell any concept or package of any type, but change and uh, um, you know, new circumstances or and working with and managing those things. Those are life skills, and our young people have opportunities along the way to learn in settings and plant the seeds for those changes that are going to happen for a lifetime. And I know with our own kids, I think some of those transitions really helped equip them with some things that they might not have had. Given all that, that I get it. I know that it's really hard, and I just want to acknowledge it. And I don't want to drone on longer about it. I've probably made my point, but we believe that we've achieved some improved transportation efficiencies. I think we're positioned to handle future growth for that 3 to 5 years. I think I kind of mentioned that before, that some have asked, well, why such a short timeline? Realistically, in a district like ours, that's, you know, probably what we can get a pretty good feel for. You may have noticed in those graphs, I'm sure you did, the years 6 through 10, they're kind of shaded, and that was to suggest these numbers probably become a little less reliable because you're getting quite a ways out there, and a lot of change happens in communities like ours, and there's going to be impacts that we can't fully predict at this point. But we will go through this again. We did, you know, of those things that we continue to give consideration to, we tried to think intuitively, what might this look like in 3 to 5 years? And let's say we have a new elementary school in 5 years and we have to populate that school. What kind of makes sense when we look at that? That's crystal ball work. That's pretty hard to fully envision. But at the same token, we remained cognizant of that so that we didn't lose sight of that, because we know we've built schools before. I think we're going to do it again. I don't know exactly when, but we're on the front end of some serious and significant planning for that, I think, and we will have to go through this again at some point. So we try to think in terms intuitively, what sort of makes sense, that if we're going to move some neighborhoods, does it intuitively make sense that they might be aligned or co-located or nearby where this property is at? And again, you can't bat 1,000 with that and hit on all cylinders perfectly, but we did at least try to keep that on our radar. We also tried to consider, or we did consider, prior boundary changes. Some of our neighborhoods have been through this probably each and every one of those times that I have since I've been here. And we did keep that in mind. So for neighborhoods that perhaps have not moved before, you know, we were aware of that. And for those that have moved multiple times, we were also cognizant of that. And you know, those aren't necessarily, any one of those criteria or things that we looked at aren't necessarily deal makers or breakers, but they're things that we just stay aware of and try to really look at the full package of things that we should be paying attention to. The school demographics stay pretty constant or consistent across all of our buildings. No major changes. I think, as Dr. Queener has mentioned a few times, is that we try to work toward district averages and not achieve district averages in all of our buildings. But I think we're focused on that along with many other things through this process. Some progress was made toward neighborhood schools. I don't have the shape of our school district, but you might kind of remember it's sort of an oblong northwest to southeast shaped school district. It's about 33 square miles. It's bisected by Highway 55, 494, Highway 12, Vicksburg, and 101, and it really has a lot of major roads that kind of go through it. And that can create some transportation logistical challenges. Sometimes those are some things that we have to keep an eye on when we work on these types of projects as well. But we think that there has been some progress with the transportation efficiencies. Positioning us to handle student growth. Again, they can pop in any given neighborhood, and all of a sudden you have houses coming up right and left, and they happen to be in the same school attendance zone. And you know, we can then go into that creative mode again of how do we accommodate and manage this number of students. We talked about the pure elementary feeder to middle schools. I feel really good about that. I really like the feeder school concept, and I'm glad we were able to find a way to do that. We could not have done that if we would not have had that real estate, underutilized real estate at West Middle School. That was the deal maker. And Central can manage 4 elementary schools very well. 5 is a challenge, but 4 works, and 3 is a challenge at East. 2 and a third might work, which we played around with a little bit, but we just realized that maybe that third of Kimberly Lane and the challenges and other associated things to keep in mind with that. We kept working on finding a different way to do that, and I'm glad that we did. A lot of feedback from the input team. I appreciate the work that they did, all the parents and staff members that were part of that input team. That benefited us as well. Some of the challenges, and sorry I've droned on so much about this, but I think some of this context is helpful, and I hope it's a good historical background and kind of paints a bigger picture of the challenges with this type of work. We're going to have to continue with some of those pocket boundaries. We like the idea of a fully contiguous map where the colors are all look really nice on the map and there aren't some of those pockets, but I don't think this school community footprint is there yet. Until we get more grown out in the western parts of the school district, I think it's going to be really hard to settle into those real clean cut contiguous boundaries. But we'll continue to strive for that over the coming years, but we aren't there yet, and that's why we continue to find some comfort in some areas that maybe stand out a little bit that are going to schools that aren't necessarily co-located, but it works for us, and we're able to manage the transportation piece, but we try to perhaps minimize the amount of time that any individual students or neighborhoods might be making those longer commutes and transportation routes. But yeah, we've used another strategy of assigning homes based on purchase agreements. So there are times where a single development might literally have 2 elementary attendance zones because one school has kind of filled up, and then we know there's a new wing or a new part of a development that's opening up, and we designate that for one of our schools that has capacity. So we utilize oftentimes a purchase agreement date. For example, any purchase agreement signed after July 1, 2025 will attend this school. And that actually has worked pretty well. Early on, there's kind of a small number of students, but it doesn't take long in some of these quickly developing neighborhoods to increase the student enrollment. So if new schools are built, obviously some neighborhoods could be moved in the future. It's very likely. Again, we have to move students into a new building because there aren't any assigned there yet. There are a few transportation inefficiencies yet, but I don't think you can ever get to 100% efficiency with your transportation schedules. We have about 85 school buses that run every day. They do 3 routes. There's Route 1, or Tier 1, 2, and 3. And then I think we have another, I can't remember how many special education buses we have, but quite a number. Our buses drive a distance equivalent to, I think, 2 trips around the equator weekly. So it's a lot of mileage that they put on. So a little bit of a trivia question about our transportation system. So that brings us to next steps, and we're here tonight. We've made the presentation on and provided some anecdotal feedback in regard to the process, our larger community. It's December 18th. That came up really quickly. It seems it's hard to believe we're at this point in the school year already. If approved, implementation plans will begin immediately to include some of these things listed here, and I put the caveat on there, others is determined, but updating our student information systems, that's a big deal in order to make sure that we have students positioned in their correct schools, any special information about those students that needs to be a part of that information system. It's quite a lot of manual input to accomplish that. Developing and implementing transition plans. Again, our principals have good game plans for that. They're excellent at it, and all the teachers and staff in those buildings are as well. Communication to the impacted families as a result of attendance area changes, and then all other things that evolve and present themselves to us, we, we'll do our very best to ensure that we create really good transition plans. So after that, I think that brings us to comments, questions, or insights. Ray and Scott, I feel like I did a lot of talking there in that flyover of information, but was there anything that I left out or that you wanted to share or highlight or emphasize further?
No, I think you touched on all of it. And I think Dr. Anderson really highlighted the complexities of the process and all the variables that were inside of that. And it wasn't just looking at one single area, it was looking at the district overall. And I also appreciated explaining the 3 to 5 years in a growing district. That's a huge challenge. As we've talked about at length at a number of board meetings, even recently, the district is up over 400 kids from last year. We've done two demographic studies in the last 2.5 years. And the demographic study that was done and presented to the board in the late fall, early winter of 2022, we're already 2.5 years ahead of that projection. So I think it absolutely creates challenges. It also creates opportunities. And I've mentioned that before from a budgetary perspective. It's allowed us to come out of cost containment. We're in hopefully our last year of that. It's allowed us to come out of that considerably. I think districts across the state, generally speaking, are seeing stagnated or declining enrollment. This is a positive thing, especially for the fact that we're a pupil-driven revenue system. Without that growth and getting 2% from the state on our state aid poses a huge challenge because, as we know, our expenditures are far outpacing those revenues that we receive. So this growth also gives us an opportunity to offer the programs we have, the buildings that we have, and the continued expansion and growth.
I think the only thing that I would add is that, and I mentioned this last week as well, is that I know we're looking at concept 9, and there was way more than 9 concepts that were considered even throughout the iteration of the design team meetings. There were hundreds of what if questions asked, and not all of those make it to a concept, but literally I think we've talked about just about every neighborhood in the district, the design team. And so I just, from the naming convention, it may not demonstrate the volume of scenarios that were looked at and considered in the moment, and maybe dismissed because it wasn't delivering on a outcome that was hoped for. So that was the only other thing I would add.
I might just add one more thing too, based on what Scott shared about the number of students of growth for each year. So we're reestablishing our trend line. You might recall that with the 2021 school year, we started the year with 200 fewer students than we had the year prior during the COVID year. And then we stagnated for a year, and then we started building upward again. So we're trying to, again, get our arms around what's this new established trend line. I mentioned before we were kind of on that 250 to 300 line for a number of years. And then we had a break in that line, but we're getting back there. I don't think the 400 that we have this year is the new trend line. I don't think that'll be every year, but there might have been some built up movement or moving, so to speak, maybe some employment growth in the west part of the metro area or something that brought more people here. But anyway, we're still repositioning that trend line, but it's up. It's not down. We are not one of the districts that is declining and or closing buildings, and that's a good thing. Our frustrations and challenges are different, but they're the better kind to be challenged by than closing buildings and reassigning boundaries when we're shutting down a school. And there are districts that are doing that, multiples perhaps. So anyway, that's enough anecdotal, I'm sure, for one night for you. But again, hopefully it was helpful and again, somewhat paints the bigger picture beyond just this attendance area adjustment, which is a big deal. I don't mean to underestimate that at all. It is a big process and a big change anytime we go through this. There are a lot of moving parts in the district that we're trying to accommodate, and a lot of our staff, all of our staff really work really hard to provide and create a really wonderful learning experience for all of our kids. That's first and foremost what we want to be spending our time on, and not all of the logistical and operational things. But anyway, it's all a package, right? So I'll hang up and listen and turn it back over to you. Madam
Thank you
Vice
so
Chair.
much, Dr. Anderson. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Dr. Queener, for the thorough explanation. I think it's really important that we have that. Board colleagues, this is the time now to ask your questions. I know that we've all had an opportunity within our committee meetings and through the past months to engage with administrators and ask all of our questions, but please bring forth all of your questions at this point. Sheila, go ahead.
I just, yeah, I've asked a lot of questions and you answered them tonight, so thank you for that. I wanted to comment that I appreciate that we are having feeder schools for the middle schools. And thank you for clarifying how we were able to evolve the plans. Chase, you mentioned at West converting locker rooms into classrooms. So I know the plans evolved, and hopefully you've set anyone's mind at ease who was worried about capacity issues at the middle schools. And thank you for again for keeping the feeder schools. I have a question about the intra-district transfers. I'm sure a lot of community members' ears perked up when you talked about that. And when, if this goes into effect immediately, essentially, I anticipate people will start submitting requests for that. And do you have kind of ideas about what that's going to look like? For example, if you have, you might have in a situation where families from two different schools kind of want to swap, and maybe they're not communicating with each other, but will you be taking that into consideration to say, well, we will have room if we transfer this family and that kind of thing?
That's a good question. I think that would be a practice that we'd continue to monitor as we move forward. We're on a bit of a crisp timeline because I think I heard some elementary principals talking today about kindergarten open houses at their schools in late January. So that's why there's some urgency to land this, because we have to do all of the reentry of data for students that are going to be relocating. So that's a pretty big task. I want to be cautious to not overpromise and then end up under delivering. So I'm going to be real hesitant to get real deep in the weeds here with this, but I did emphasize the intra-district transfer process. It is there. In past years, we've taken a look at maybe a focus on that final year in a school. So in other words,
Be fair to say people should submit those sooner rather than later if they're.
I think they certainly can if they're impacted by the move. Those forms are available online and people can submit those. Again, I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver because we have to know that there is room in the buildings for any remaining fifth graders or, well, eighth grade, we're going to do that. We can manage that at our middle schools, but elementaries are a little bit different. But anyway, that's why I emphasize the intra-district transfer process. And I think, do you have something you want to add
Yeah,
with that?
I think I would just add as it relates to the elementaries, of course, we talked about the feeders and how we were able to keep that feeder concept, but that would be just one of the admittedly challenging situations of an interdistrict transfer if it was from a school that was currently going to Central that wanted to go to West, or an elementary that would then feed to West. That would pose a challenge long term for West's middle school, because as Dr. Anderson talked about, we are looking at potential opportunities to be able to handle that space and capacity at West, but obviously there's limits on that. So that would just be another complex variable that would be into the equation.
And would intra-district transfers at the elementary level, they would have to provide their own transportation. Would they also be able to, if they're close to a bus stop, be able to take advantage of that, kind of like you described for the middle schoolers?
I think so. I'd feel more comfortable answering that if our transportation director was here, and
Okay.
I'd let him answer it. But I think that concept would probably work. And I don't know how often it would be utilized. A lot of families just would choose to drive them to the school, probably, if they're able to do that. But if it works with transportation, that would all have to be coordinated with them.
Thank you. I'll let others ask their questions.
Paris.
Should we ask all questions at once, or you want to take time?
Let's do one or two.
Or
then
one.
we-
So, so I'll start with two data clarifications. So on slide 27, it said fourth grade students will not be able to remain at their current schools because of the adjustments. Do we know how much the volume is? Because again, it's 1 year before they go to middle school. Is that smaller percentage? Like, do we have that data handy or?
Yeah, we have actually pulled that data. I think Scott just
Okay.
pulled it up here on his packet.
Yes, Paras, to answer your question right now, the kids that we believe are impacted, this is roughly at 54 students.
And that's current fourth graders.
Okay. And is it across different elementary or a particular elementary school is impacted?
I might turn to Jen Woke as well to answer, but it would be kind of spread throughout. So,
Okay.
yes, there is a concentration of about 13 that will be moving to Birchview and Central Middle School that were at Sunset Hill and East Middle School.
And then the next comment, and I'll turn it over to somebody else before I ask my other question. So just based on, and maybe Dr. Kuhner, you can answer this question. So one of the parameters was we have to keep next 3 to 5 years in mind. And again, the complexity of process and the whole demographics, I mean, you talked about it. So again, it is extremely complex process, and we know we're not going to hit on all cylinders. Agreed. But just knowing, maybe based on your experience, as a parent, if I have to set expectations for myself, would I be saying that, hey, if I get moved to a different school now, and in the next 3 to 5 years, if we were to make another boundary adjustment, should I set that expectation that, hey, I might get moved, or I will not because now I already moved this year or next year?
Yeah, maybe I'll start with that one. It might depend on individual families and maybe the types of conversations that parents might have with their children in regard to I don't know, their maturity level, their ability to think in terms of 3 to 5 years out, and what might that mean? Am I tracking
Yeah,
the question correct?
no, actually, my question was,
Sorry.
again, once we make the boundary adjustment, and now let's say next 3 to 5 years, we have to make another boundary adjustment. Do we think the same neighborhood that moved to a different school, let's say next year, they can potentially have to move somewhere else, or we think they most likely won't get impacted because they will get impacted next year? You know what I mean?
Yep, I think sorry, I went the wrong route on the question, but I think it's possible. But when I referenced earlier how we tried to project what will 3 to 5 years look like. And intuitively, with what we know now, with where the available possible new home construction areas would be,
Right.
what might that look like in 3 to 5 years? But again, there aren't definites to that. I mean, we have some general ideas about, and I think, and maybe Ray can speak to this a little bit better, but I know that when they did their enrollment projections out into the future, they knew what the future developments were if they were established. Can you maybe just share a little bit more about what we know with the cities that are still growing?
Yeah, so the key assumption that we made was all known developments that are permitted and plotted and are in progress, we assumed will be built out 100% in 5 years. So that's just a based on experience. As we looked at the district, that could change quickly. That's really a huge driving factor. I think you asked about experience, and the ideal number of years that a district would like to have boundaries or attendance areas fixed is 6 years. In a district like Wayzata, because a kindergarten student starting next year would matriculate through the system. Now, that still could have an impact on a family, right, if they have siblings. 3 to 5 years gets you, depending on what year the student is. But there's a lot of variables that could impact that. And given this process and the commitment to paying attention to areas that have been moved, I would speculate from my experience that that would still be at the forefront. And that would be a consideration in future endeavors. Because our experience is no one wants to have to move if they don't have to. from the district's perspective, they don't want to have to move kids if they don't have to. But it's an answer that says there's no guarantees, but very cognizant of that future concern.
Thank you.
I think I would just add to that, Paris, is to kind of answer your question, and obviously building off of what Dr. Anderson and Dr. Queener said, is that we don't have a crystal ball. We can't project growth. Obviously, we saw overestimated growth this year, over projected rather. But when we look into that, and I can tell you, it was one of the guiding principles. It was one of the things we've talked about several times tonight. When the design team was going about their work, that was absolutely a consideration. So we factored in, had they been moved prior? How many times had they been moved prior? Have they not been moved? Okay. If we did move them, is it highly likely that they'll remain at the building that we move them to now? That was part of the thought process in a lot of this. And then also, like we've talked about, I believe at our last board work session where we discussed this, is just due to the potential growth in the district will grow out in the west and the north. By default, we're going to pull back to the eastern schools. Why is that? Because we're not seeing that population growth there, and we have to keep building capacity, as was per the goal of this. So also as part of that, when we looked at that, it will have to pull. So when you might look and go, well, this school, this neighborhood, that's close to, in the northern part of the district or Northwoods or Meadowbridge, they might go to a new school, or odds are they would shift more to the east. So to answer your question, that was kind of a long circle, but it was definitely something we absolutely considered in the process. So can't definitively answer that, but yes, it absolutely was something we considered.
And I'll add one more thing on the, so districts that continue with our product, we're monitoring this on a quarterly basis. And so for Wayzata Public Schools, the system will monitor every quarter the developments and we'll adjust accordingly. And what we found is that we typically do a complete analysis every 6 months, depending on what the district's needs. So if that goes into the future, the district's not going to wait 3 years and then look at it again. We'll be monitoring it along the way. So it shouldn't be a surprise at whatever point we have to make adjustments.
Okay. Thank you.
Dan, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you so much for being here. It really means a lot. It's really been a joy to be a part of this process and hear your reports and just demonstrating all your hard work and collaboration with the community. So my question pertains to just community commentary or feedback that we received along the lines of the specific percentages with facility utilization, 90%, 94%. I was wondering if you could kind of speak to the flexibility that exists in those numbers. Is there kind of an ideal facility utilization rate? If not, kind of where does that flexibility come in?
I'll start with that one since no one else was talking. I think it kind of depends, again, on the style of the building. I think some buildings probably have greater flex space and opportunities for creative utilization. Other buildings, again, I spoke about East Middle School and perhaps the type of classroom instruction that was occurring. Not that new wave constructions or instruction is not happening there, but it's just different based on when the building might have been constructed. And I think those utilization factors really are, they're kind of fluid. I've always tried to think in terms of two different terminologies for that, what I call a maximum capacity, and the other one would be a functional capacity. So if you take the number of boxes in a school and figure out how many students you might want to put in each one, that gives you a maximum capacity. But is that functional, where every room is tied up every period in a school day? Probably not. So in a middle school, there's a lot more collaborative type of work, teams that are established, interdisciplinary instruction between teachers or teams of teachers, and larger flex spaces are probably needed if you're creating CTE classrooms for career tech ed type programming. You need kind of an oversized room. Literally, some of the construction in our future may actually be taking 3 classrooms and converting them into 2 at some of our middle schools in order to create labs and some of the CTE and science lab type work that we would want to be able to accomplish and implement there. Once you start doing that, it's going to impact your capacity for middle schools. So that might help. I mean, it might establish that need or drive toward a 4th middle school, because we may have less capacity for that type of educational programming that our teaching and learning department, our principals want to develop and implement. Our current facilities would have some limiting factors for that, not ones that would exclude us from being able to do that, but we're going to have to do some type of work. So that functional and maximum capacities, I think, can vary building to building based on the construction style. And you want a little bit of flexibility and fluidity in order to navigate the building and to be able to let teachers and principals be creative.
And I think generally the idea was that we try to design to 90%. That was the target. And there is a variability that can be allowed. Some schools are able to operate at 95% with no concerns. There are some schools that could run at 100% for a short term, not a long-term solution. But in addition to everything that Dr. Anderson mentioned, it's also important to pay attention to your core facilities, your cafeteria, media center, your restrooms, because even if you have classrooms, you still have to be able to accommodate those other spaces as well. So all of that kind of gets factored into, you know, you don't have to lock in right at 90%. You could go over if you've got core facilities to meet the needs, if you've got some short-term solutions within the 4 walls, and that's dependent upon the style of the building and the year it was built and those types of things.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you. That was a great one for me to follow. Thank you for a reminder that a lot of the reasons why we do this work is so that we can achieve our commitment to excellence in education, and that there's always a teaching and learning component to that. And so thinking about our spaces so that we can continue to move that forward is really important. I have 2 things that I'm hopeful about. I'm hopeful that the statement about looking at 4th graders and and interdistrict transfers, I know it's not always possible, but I'm hopeful that that will remain something that we look to do for our students who are facing those transitional times. I'm also hopeful, building on Parsa's statement, that we looked at this process, that we maybe started with a desire to be really comprehensive and maybe reach a finish line into where, so that we don't have to do this every 3 to 5 years. And we learned that we are still growing and we're not at that point yet as much as we want to. And so I'm hopeful that we've been really strategic, which it sounds like we have, and said, we're going to make adjustments. We're going to be thinking about it so that when we do this again, right, that we have set ourselves up and we're starting in a spot that's a better spot, or that's ahead of where we were. So those are my hopefuls. And now I'm going to get to my question, and it reminds everyone that I'm the old lady on the board, because I remember when we opened Meadow Ridge, and we asked families to move, and we opened this new school, and we disrupted all of these things, and then they had class in a hallway because we didn't build the school to the size that we needed to build it with our robust growth. And that was because we made our case. We told the state that we were going to do that, but there is a long list of boxes that we had to check and requirements that we had to do, and they didn't trust us that we actually needed the whole space. And so we did what we could do. We opened Meadow Ridge. We had some classes in a classroom, and families were moved and disrupted for not the ideal. Luckily, the state learned and they trusted us. And so when we built Northwood, and so construction started on Meadow Ridge. And when we built Northwoods, they believed us and we got to be bigger. And that has served us well. So my question is some of what we are doing right now and looking at maximum capacity in each of our buildings and making these decisions, is that integrating some of the learning that we had in the last couple rounds of moving that really helps us to make the case to the people that will give us the authorization, if we determine that our district is continuing to grow and we need new spaces, that we've done all the due diligence that we can do in the utmost professional way to make it so that we don't have to build a school and then add on to a school or do other things, but that we can make our case.
Great question. I would say yes, we have certainly learned from the past decade plus about the growth in our community. When we've worked with consultants in the past several years, we're identified as somewhat of an anomaly within the metro area because of the rate that we have been growing. And it's not that there aren't other communities that are, but it's certainly a reality for us, as we all know. It's part of why we're here tonight. But maybe it'd be an opportunity for Ray to share just a little bit about the longer term enrollment growth that you saw in your metrics and models that you put together and kind of what that looks like based on what you can see at this point.
So I think one of the things that a nuance, not to get too technical in the projection modeling, is that we start off with what we call a cohort survival, which is basically how many third graders are fourth graders the next year. And that ratio will include growth as long as it's a straight line growth. For Wayzata, the challenge is that the developments are accelerating at a faster pace than what your trend line shows in the cohort, which when you look at the graphs, you're seeing the two lines, the cohort survival and the development. So that introduces that unknown variable. When a district is truly operating either up or down off of the cohort survival rate, it's a lot easier to plan and see what's happening. But I do think the system that's been put into place, the monitoring system over the long term, will be able to give you that historical perspective in terms of raw numbers, submitting information to the state to demonstrate, here's where we've been, here's what we've been monitoring, here's the trend we're seeing, and it'll give you valuable information when you get to that point in time of designing a size of a school and what you see as coming. It'll give you that information.
Valentina?
Before I ask the question, I need clarification. I see that there are going to be 501 students disrupted from K to 5, correct? I mean, in the paperwork, it states. So did we include middle school students there or not? I mean, based on if it is from K till 5, and it's on page 7.
That is just K through 5. So middle schools, obviously, with doing the feeder system and the continuous process, allowed us to handle those impacted.
So some middle schoolers are going to be disrupted too, am I right?
As Dr. Anderson outlined, that's where we had the opportunity for those students to continue at the school with or without transportation, depending on the situation.
Thank you for clarification. Question I have is, I had exactly the same question about fourth graders, but on top of it, I wanted to add, you said there are 54 students would be affected. To be honest, I've seen in looking at data for some reason that fourth graders, I think that this is the age which was hit by COVID first time. So when they were learning to read, they were in masks and tried to learn to read when you cannot see adult showing how to read. So I'm hoping that we'll put, I'm not only hoping, I would like it to see that we will give, these students suffered enough, I feel like, looking at the data, that we will give them opportunity, fourth graders, to stay in their school if parents can help them out, at least. Because as I said, again, they already had some disruption. They experienced from the beginning. And being able to stay within familiar place, and hopefully after READ Act and all, they will take advantage of that. And that will give them good opportunity to start middle school. Will we be able to do that? Will we be able to give an opportunity to stay?
for the fourth graders.
Yes.
Yeah, we spoke. I mean, I really appreciate your comments and the reminder about, the journey that the current fourth grade kids have had is a good reminder for all of us, I think, too. Um, I shared a bit about that earlier, just in that that'll be one of the administrative protocols that we'll take a good close look at, because I've heard that theme from a number of folks here tonight, board members, and um, again, I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. I want to make sure that before we make commitments like that, that we know that we can accommodate it. Um, because it's a relatively smaller number, what was it, 50, 54?
10%.
Again, I'll come up just short of saying it's probably a workable number, but we have to explore it a little bit more and make sure that we can accommodate that. But I think the points here tonight are well taken, and I appreciate that you're sharing those perspectives.
And second one, if I can ask, there were some comments from, sorry, I can wait, sorry. We heard comments from parents that there are some neighborhoods who literally, if you swap them, I mean, there are some neighborhoods who would like still to stay, and other neighborhoods would like to stay within their boundaries. And if you swap them, it still, I mean, you will still reach what you want to capacity. Is it possible?
I'm not sure specifically what neighborhoods you're talking about, but I can speak kind of generally. It would be dependent. Obviously, if it was an equal swap, it would be absolutely something we would have considered in the process. But more than likely, it was someone, or it was a situation where one would go back to, where they originally were, the same in both, but then there'd be a third party impacted, and depending on the variables and impacts that both of those would have, it would have an overall arching impact on a third area. So without knowing specifics, kind of hard to answer that one.
I might just add there's almost invariably a domino effect of you make a change and then it impacts this, and it might be now the middle school doesn't work with that pipeline of feeders heading off to that same middle school. So those were some of the things that we vetted out along the way that you think, hey, this would be a great idea, let's do this. And then you run into that roadblock because it just doesn't work for the long term. And sometimes the two different schools might have different middle schools that they go to. And if you return to the home elementary school or keep that group there, and for example, moving all of Oakwood into West Middle School to maintain the feeder concept, it might disrupt that, where now it'll knock that out where you can't take the full school because an elementary got larger, or a group of students that would continue on to, just using that example, West Middle School again. So it's really also interconnected, and to change one thing can really have a ripple effect. And those are the types of things that we really worked hard to try to vet out. And we did look at lots and lots of concepts and a lot of different ways of trying to put the big puzzle together. But there has to be, pretty good alignment. And those are some of the complications or challenges that we have. But we did a lot of that actually, and tried to figure out, could this work, or, what else could we do along with that? And I think we did find some good solutions and a lot of good ways forward. But you'll probably remember that list of criteria that we utilized as we made decisions. And in the guiding change document, you always establish all these ideals that you want to accomplish. But as you work through the process, you kind of have to gauge what are the trade-offs and what can't we do, and how do we maximize achieving as many of those goals and objectives as we can, yet at the same time realizing that we probably can't do all of them. But that was a long answer. I apologize, but I found
I have to admit that this one looks like a big puzzle. You just get comfortable with one version, and then you look at another one, and then you get mixed up with all the ideas. I'm not sure how you are holding all the information. Truth.
it's complicated. Yeah, there's no doubt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paris, go ahead.
Yeah, so clearly we are copying each other's notes. So, so I'm going to try and position my two questions, but a little bit of context. And I think it was Reserve at Medina that had recommended, hey, we have 154 houses. Can you trade us with another similar size neighborhood? So that's one example. We also heard from some of the community members from Weston Ridge that they weren't on the list, but they were in the last revision and they didn't get enough time to review. They were thinking they were all good, and then last revision changed. Now, again, completely understand it's complicated process, and again, when you move one parameter, something else gets impacted. Simran Ponds, I think there was another one where there are 5 families and 8 kids that are now moved from one school to another. So again, with that, and again, I know there are more, but those are the 3 that sort of coming to my mind now. So with that, are we 100% confident that we are done? Like there are no stones unturned? Or should we take maybe 2-3 weeks more and look at some of the outliers? Now, I'm not suggesting that the number should change and we should go back and start impacting other neighborhoods. And maybe 3 weeks later, we come back and this is it. This is the proposal. But I just wanted to understand, like, have we given enough time with all the iterations? And I understand, Dr. Anderson, you talked about how that impacts the kindergarten onboarding and the whole process and system that needs to be set up. So completely understand there are dependencies. But my question is, again, are we at a point where we just know that there is not going to be any other model other than what we have? Or would it make sense for us to take maybe 2-3 weeks more, take a look at it, maybe come back with the same recommendation, but take some time to at least go through another iteration, if you will? And like I said, we may come back with the exact same recommendation, but again, just wanted to get your guys' view.
Yep, it's a fair question. I'll start that one off. My 2 colleagues here may have some additional things to share or add as well. Keep in mind, we've been at this for 3 or 4 months. I think we had 13 design team meetings. Is that the right number? I've lost track. Of about 30 people that were on that, included a number of principals, other district staff, 3 of us, and several others. And we vetted everything that we possibly could. So I think we have really looked at it comprehensively. We've, I don't know, nearly exhausted the possibilities. Anything we change now, it's going to have that domino effect, and it's going to impact something else. And once you start doing that, it's just, I think it's going to have that continuous impact of then causing some new solution, which then that solution will create a complication. So I can speak confidently that I think we have really worked hard in this 3 to 4 months with a lot of internal staff and community members who served on the input team and provided their perspectives. I don't think we would be able to come back in 3 or 4 weeks with something transformational and magical that would land it perfectly where we had 100% satisfaction and everybody was content with what the final plan was. So that's my response to your question, and I'm confident in the process that we've used and how thoroughly we have looked at the neighborhoods and the concepts and the opportunities and options. So it would be my hope that we can move forward and know how to move forward with our implementation plan. 3 to 4 weeks sounds maybe to some like a relatively shorter time period, but it's pretty critical because 4 weeks gets us to January, what is the date? January 18th. So we'd be in week 3 already of January. I believe we have kindergarten open houses the end of January, that last week of January. So to delay that I don't see how we could turn around and preparing for that. And then that would bump back a next major event in the district of staffing. So we start our staffing process. I'll look at our executive director of human resources in February, January. When do we start that, Stacy? February. So then we would be a couple weeks away from that. So it's part of why we established this timeline, that really we're sort of at the critical point of ensuring that all these other systems can get launched. And I don't know that we're going to land on a more satisfactory solution for the larger organization. Maybe for individual neighborhoods that would be more satisfied if something were to evolve where they didn't move. It would end up resulting in moving another neighborhood that then similar or the same types of complications would evolve. And again, we took into account location, what seems to make sense, proximity to school. We do have some neighborhoods that are probably, kind of equidistant to 2 different schools, maybe even 3 around the community. So there might be multiple right answers for that, which are always your most difficult solutions to find. And we tried to use that best degree of intuitiveness that we might have in regard to what might we expect to happen in 3 to 5 years. So I think we've exercised that really well, not perfectly, but I think really well. I don't know that there's a long list of additional transformational creative solutions to put something together that I think is really a solid plan in how we've repositioned the middle schools, how in most cases, not all, those trend lines for each of our elementary schools approximate a space between those 2 lines of the cohort group and the new construction group. Did I call those the right thing? So, and that really was kind of the goal, was to hit that, 90% capacity, going back to an earlier question. So again, that was a long answer, but I think it kind of needed a long answer, because that, again, demonstrates the complexity of it. And I don't know that we would land on anything that would feel fundamentally different than what we landed, other than to perhaps individuals and individual neighborhoods within the community. I mean, as I said before, the really hard part of this is eventually there has to be, and there's going to be some impact somewhere, or we end up right back where we started. The beauty of it, we have 9 elementary schools that are phenomenal, and we have comparable hiring protocols to hire teachers. In fact, the principals generally work together and they interview groups of teachers, and then they determine what's the best placement. So they're really locked in together on how they approach the staffing and the hiring process. The curriculums are the same. So, it's any landing spot of our elementary schools or middle schools are phenomenal, and they all work their way toward that one fantastic high school within our school district that all of us are so proud of, and that provides so many wonderful opportunities for our students. So that's kind of a larger global perspective on it, but I don't know, may or may not be helpful, but thanks for listening.
Thank you.
I think I would just add, Paris, that just to build off what Dr. Anderson said, I think we've looked at every angle and many different possibilities throughout the process. I think, as Dr. Anderson alluded to, we had some generalities about the criteria that we looked at that we went through earlier in the slides show that were factored. And we knew at some point there was going to have to be some trade-offs, right? So just kind of building off of that, some of those neighborhoods that you had mentioned, there was absolutely consideration that was taken into that. So it kind of alluded to the fact of, have they moved before? If they have, obviously we tried to be mindful of that. If they hadn't and we were going to move them, was the thought process was it highly likely that they would remain in the school that we were moving them to in 3 to 5 years, to answer your earlier question. So those were both kind of thought processes. We also looked at just the pure location of it in both of the neighborhoods that you mentioned. And I should clarify, 7 ponds of the presentation, that was corrected. That was an error that was corrected. So 7 ponds was corrected. But getting back to the ones that you mentioned, they literally do touch areas that go to the schools that they're now going to. When you look at the map, there was, especially in the first one that you had mentioned, the design team, and I think it's important to remember and build off of what Dr. Anderson said, this work has been going on for 3 to 4 months. We've had 28 to 30 administrators and leaders throughout the district that care deeply about students and are trying to plan mindfully. We also had an input team of 80 plus people. And so, and then the countless hours spent outside of that working and considering all these different variables. But those were some of the variables that were in it. When we looked at the reserve at Medina that you mentioned, they do physically touch that area. As I just mentioned, those large groups that were looking at it, in every concept that came out from the design team, they were going to Northwoods. When we look out, that would be where I talked about the district pulling eastward to eastward schools to keep population up. That would be one that we would consider staying at Northwoods, obviously, because just like when we opened Northwoods, that school opened with, I think, roughly 500 students. Within a year, it was at 700 students, pandemic, and now it's almost at 800 students. So we wouldn't open up a brand new 10th elementary school if we had that opportunity and that was the direction we went. We wouldn't open it at full capacity. So those were some of the variables. And like I said, we factored in distance as well. So that would be one that adds a much closer distance to Northwoods than it would be to Greenwood. So just some variables on that. Obviously, like I mentioned, there's a lot of complexities in that. And also there were 7 neighborhoods that were moved out of Greenwood. So it wasn't just one area specifically. Some of the areas that were talked about moving, I think some of them mentioned were Meadowview and Weston Woods. Just to kind of clarify, Meadowview and Fields of Medina are kind of one big area, and it was confusing, and I understand that because in the map, it essentially said Gleason Lake. Well, that was to build off of what Dr. Anderson talked about earlier with the purchase agreement dates. We had such growth that you would have neighborhoods literally where, depending on a purchase date, they would go to a different school because capacity would hit one. But I think it was a little complex, and what I'm getting at is that both of those areas, Meadowview and Weston Woods, the majority of those students already go to Greenwood. So there wouldn't be an equatable flop, right, if that makes sense. So, and also, if we were to move them to Northwoods, they're literally located, one is located literally across Highway 55 from where the 10th elementary school would be, and the new middle school if we were to do that, and the other one is just up the road from it too. And they're in the west, obviously, so they would naturally be pulling east towards that new school. So those were some of the other variables with that. As it relates to Weston Ridge, that was another area. I believe there's about 60, 61 students in there. And you're correct, that did come late in consideration, but all of these variables, just what came to the board, were the ones that came out. There was, I think, Dr. Queener would tell you and Dr. Anderson would tell you, we would split into multiple groups and there would be tons of different examples. So what they listed about the different concepts, there were probably how many, 15 times, 20 times that. So that wasn't kind of the first consideration. That was the first time it came out that way. So, but that was another example of, if you look in the current boundary map, there was already a jut out that came into Northwoods a little bit. It basically pulled a little bit west to pull that east. The area right next to them already goes to Meadow Ridge. We believe in the 3 to 5 year projection, just that I've talked about with the eastward movement, that neighborhood would end up going to Meadow Ridge. So we're looking at least disruption. Some of the neighborhoods that were talked about that should have, Bon Air was mentioned, Tavera was mentioned, Ravinia was mentioned. A lot of those have been moved prior, and so that was some of the criteria as well. So I don't want to dig too deep into it because I don't want to focus on just two areas, because I want to be respectful, because there was multiple areas that were moved and there's a lot of kids that were impacted. But I just wanted to highlight that because there is a lot of complexity to this and there's a lot of variables that have to be considered. And I understand and absolutely empathize. It's a complex and challenging situation. And, we looked at all the variables we could to try to make the best decisions possible.
Scott, one last question. So, and I know in the presentation, there was a mention of, hey, this was split neighborhood before and now it all goes to one. So where we've heard concerns, right, all of those neighborhoods are going to one school, or do we still have a situation in any of those neighborhoods where we have split schools, if you will?
That's a great question. My recollection is that I think we've solved most of those, if not all of them at this point. And then I say, to build off of what Dr. Anderson said, we are a growing district. And so it will not be long that we will go back to purchase agreement dates, excuse me, which is why if you look at the top of the district, there is kind of, I call it the stovepipe, but up kind of in the Tavera range there, about a third of that is developed roughly, and that was sent to Kimberly Lane. So if you look in the packet from TeamWorks, you would go, why did they move them to Kimberly Lane? Kimberly Lane's going to be over capacity. Well, Kimberly Lane would be over capacity if we let that happen. So talking to what Dr. Anderson mentioned, that would be an area that we would utilize the pocket boundaries, if you will, based on purchase agreement dates. And so we wouldn't let Kimberly Lane get to that level. At that point, that's where we would pocket to send those new developments into schools that have capacity, similar to the practice that the district has done. But even in that example, Paris, that was a split area up there, and they are all now, as that neighborhood, the kids that are there right now will all go to Kimberly Lane together.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And I'll just add, so first, and just to put in context my comments, so our role is not to advocate for or recommend a solution. We support the district and provide data and facilitate process. So I'm describing kind of what happens at the design team per your comments on if we were to look at another move. And what typically happens at this point, if there is a consideration to make a change, it literally starts either clockwise or counterclockwise process where you're pushing in one side and it's got to come out the other side, and you literally go around the district. As one of the examples that you mentioned, to make that change, then West no longer can handle the enrollment, and so then we've got to move something out of West so that we make space, and you go around the district. And I know that we looked at several of those ideas, and what was happening is that we were losing the elementary feeder system, because you have capacities at East and West Middle that really control that. And so if we want to keep the feeder system integrity, then it's hard to make all those moves. So again, not advocating for, but just explaining kind of how the process worked, because we did go around the district many times in the design meeting. If we did this, how does this impact this area? And lastly, the more you do those, the more impacted families and students you would have.
Thank you.
Board colleagues, any other questions? Go ahead, Valentina.
Based on what I heard from Paris, I would like to ask clarification. So thank you. I heard the clarification about Kimberly Lane, that it shows that it's gonna overgrow the capacity, and then you're not gonna allow, because it says capacity concerns will be addressed with pocket boundaries as new development evolves. Why not to do the same things for Northwood School?
When we looked at that, Northwoods, if you see, that does still have pretty significant growth factored in, and it goes back to a mixture of variables. Obviously, there's still growth that's happening in that area, If you recall from the last rendition, there was even some pockets in there. And so that's where I believe it was Ravinia that we consolidated those neighborhoods to keep those kids all together because that was a split area prior. And then to build off of what Dr. Queener said, it has other impacts depending on where that is. So I think when you look at it, let me pull it up here. Depending on, you'd think I would be able to page through these faster after a few months. When you look at Northwoods that you're explaining, we're showing next year at about 822. So if you're saying to drop students in there, even if it's 60 students, we're now over 100% capacity. And the one thing that might be kind of hard to conceptualize is that by putting those in, it also increases that future line out, which then you just keep growing over capacity, if that makes sense. So if we drop them in now, they would be over 100% capacity.
All right. Okay.
And then pocket boundary, those are the kids that we know about. It would create complications because we already know that there's those 61 kids. So if we're putting those in there and you're putting it on top of the 822, which is very highly likely because that is a growth area, you're going to be over capacity. And then if we're off at all, that building will be overflowing very fast.
And one more. One more clarification is I'm not an economist, but based on what I've seen, how long some housing had been on the market, I'm not sure how quickly economy will change and how quickly new buildings, new housing will be developing, especially considering interest rates. So when you are given the priority, whom are you going to be given choice to households which are already existing or to the households which might be coming in future? When you are making plans, obviously you're looking at the growth. What was more prioritized? People who already, students who already in existing housing, or students whom we might get because we have housing developments are still in consideration.
I'll start with that one. I think existing students clearly got the priority. If you look at the trend lines, they're all, pretty much pushing the capacity. We have a couple schools, and we're still trying to figure out the dynamics with this, but Plymouth Creek and Sunset Hill that drop off a little bit. So we have to figure out the source of that. But those are examples of neighborhoods that probably don't have a lot of new home growth in them currently, like our more western ones do. But I think based on, if you look at all those trend lines for all of our schools, I would say that we prioritize those who are currently here with us. When you build a new school, that's probably when you have to leave some capacity if you know there's another 400 houses coming up in the next 4 years. Like we did at Northwoods, I think we started with upper 400s or 500 students, and so it's grown by 300. I don't know, it's kind of ebbed and flowed a little bit, I think, over the years. But that's probably where you would try to preserve a little bit of space because you don't want to open a school and then have it be full the next, 1 year out. Now you have the same challenges you had before. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, I'll close us out then. I would like to lift up something that Scott, you said. This is a good problem to have. I know that this is tough. Area changes and boundary changes are always incredibly tough, but we are a growing district, and that has positive impacts for every single one of our students. And so we have to keep that in the back of our mind as we are going forward with this. I do have to say I really appreciate that we are keeping the feeder program. I think that's a really important thing at a really transitional time for students in their adolescence. I think that's incredible. I'm also hopeful, like my other board colleagues, about the fourth graders. And I have a question because really this, as a school board member, you have to think about the entire organization and you have to think about the entire district. And we are one district. And as a parent, I also really empathize with the each and every, and I think it's incredibly important. And so as these transitions happen, Dr. Anderson, you are an incredible force of educational knowledge. And we want to make sure that each one of our students has the best experience, no matter what waves and ripples might come along. Just like we did during COVID, just like, there are many things that happen. So if I am a parent who has a lot of concerns about this transition, what advice would you give, and how should that parent approach their principals and moving forward to making sure that their child has the best transition?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, and there would be a potential really long answer. I'll try to be concise, but I would say that every one of our buildings is of extremely high quality. I spoke earlier about the quality of our teachers. I can remember in my days as a principal at Edina High School and Valley View Middle School in Edina, meeting with PTA groups and sharing with them that the most important thing a principal does is hire outstanding teachers. And if you don't get that right, nothing else you do matters. And I'm extremely confident in the work that our principals do in hiring teachers. I shared that they oftentimes work together and review a large pool of teachers and then determine who goes where and where the best fit or match is based on their experiences and their talent. So I think regardless of where a parent or a child ends up, they're going to have outstanding teachers. They're going to have wonderful curriculum, same curriculum all 9 schools. And I think we're really becoming even increasingly aligned in our instructional delivery models. Our principals collaborate and work really closely together with that. So I would say that. And I would also say, having been through these a few times, invariably what I hear is, once the kids got to the new building, settled in, they, we're off and running, so to speak, and they felt good about it. That doesn't mean that there won't be some transition and, some challenge that kind of goes with it. I think moving from 2nd grade to 3rd grade can be some of that too. I mean, you have the familiarity of the building and all of those things for sure. But, life is sort of a daily set of challenges. And another thing that I hear consistently and regularly, typically from parents of freshmen in college, is hearing back from their kids how well prepared their kids were when they got to college. And we heard that with our own 2 kids. It was amazing that they found that they were so well prepared. That starts in our elementary schools, it continues through our middle schools, and all the way through high school with the outstanding opportunities that they have. So I appreciate your comments about the larger system. It really is it's one large system of 9 units of elementary, but they're kind of one, but because we don't want 5,800 elementary kids in one school, we have 9 sites where we distribute them. And, we have to fit within the footprint of the building, and that's a big part of what this is about, is trying to do that. And a lot of the kids will reassemble back at their middle school. They go from 9 to 3, maybe 10 to 4, sometimes 10 elementaries to 4 middle schools someday, and currently 9 into 3. So in the adult world, we call that networking, and we expand those that we come to know. And there are opportunities for some of that when new experiences come the way to our students. So when they get back to middle school, they have the potential to know yet even more students when they co-locate there. So again, I'm not trying to oversell anything, but there are ways to look at things that are opportunities, and it's important to do everything we can to help package those. And I just know the depth of the welcome mat that our principals roll out and that our teachers roll out to welcome new students to the building, and for those that might be leaving and going to a different building, helping them to make that transition as well. So we've done this before. Maybe I should say that I wish we weren't so good at it and so experienced at it, because it's hard work, and it's a lot of energy out to try to land it and make it work. And I'm just incredibly proud of how hard people have worked to get to this point. But I also understand, the frustrations and, the anxiety about the uncertainty, that's real. But I also know what's on the other side with our principals and our staff and how they'll ensure that they welcome everybody in.
Thank you. Well, thank you for this portion of the agenda. I think we'll be able to move on to the next portion, which is the audience opportunity to address the board. Okay. Thank you again. Okay, so this is the audience opportunity to address the board portion of the agenda. It provides an opportunity for members of the audience to address the school board. Speakers will be allotted approximately 3 minutes. Please note that this time is provided for citizens to address the board. This is not an appropriate venue for discussion or debate. If the speaker would like follow-up contact from the board, they may leave their contact information with the administrative team, which is Amy. As always, we appreciate the respectful nature of comments and input. And if you could also consider using this time as an opportunity to offer the district ways to make any transitions easier, I think that would be this would be a good time for that. We'll go in order of the sheets being presented. I don't see any students in the audience. So I will call name Adam McBride.
Thank you. Adam McBride. I am a parent of 2 students currently at Northwoods. I live in the Weston Ridge neighborhood. I'm sure you've all seen my name pop up through your email, and I appreciate the response. So thank you very much. My proposal is relatively simple. Not that you're looking for proposals, but I'm going to offer one anyways. In concept 9, looking at the variance between the projected enrollment and capacity of that school is negative throughout the next 10 years. Now, albeit after 5 years, they're become less accurate, but there's still an opportunity that remains negative. The 60 or so students that reside in Weston Ridge neighborhood are being moved to Meadow Ridge. Leaving them at Northwoods would still keep us under capacity and leave our students in place. And we've heard a lot about domino effects, and this would have no domino effect. I'm not asking other families to be pulled out. I'm not asking for other families to be moved. I'm not asking for different transportation. We're literally on the border of Meadow Ridge and Northwoods. And I just want us to stay and remain intact where we are. The other point that I have is that this wouldn't create any pocket zoning. It's simply moving the border 2 blocks to the east. I heard a lot tonight about pulling students from the west east as that continues to develop. The problem that I have with that statement is that we are being pulled east while students from the eastern side are being shipped west around us. Now, I know that's largely because of prior movements that had happened and they're respecting that, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me to move us east and then ship people around us. Lastly, one of the driving principles is to minimize disruption. There's capacity at the school. We want to stay there. This would minimize even less of our students. So I'm just urging you to consider leaving us where we're at and moving that border to the east. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca Liederman.
Hi. First, I want to say thank you for all of the transparency and all of the work that you guys have put into this. I've heard it many times tonight, and I know it's not easy. It's also not easy for the families that are impacted. And I know during school board elections, I spoke with several different members of the board about their plans and what we want to do. And back then, we talked about the need to increase capacity by building new schools. How we had this land back in like 2020. It would take a couple years to get the referendum, and then a couple more years after that to build. But here we are almost 5 years later, and I heard tonight that there has been zero effort to do any of that. And looking at the capacity charts, we know we're growing. I heard tonight that we are growing faster than the trend lines have predicted, and we're not making any efforts through any of these proposals to address any of that. Dr. Anderson, I heard that you talked about that a little bit earlier too, and I really appreciate the insight there. My concern is that we are looking at a 3 to 5 year horizon. I have a current kindergartner. If we really redistrict or rezone every 3 years, she could face this 2 more times during her elementary school and middle school career. That is a lot. It feels like all of these changes are retroactively looking at the knowns. We're looking at the birth rate of the 0 to 5, looking at who's born right now. We're looking at the knowns with the communities that have already been established and projecting them being growth. But we're not actually looking at where new community is going to continue to grow, where we're zoned for more residential and where that's going to happen. And I really would like to understand what we're doing to be more proactive with these boundarying so that we can get more to the standard for a district like Wayzata, which I heard tonight was 6 years, rather than less than 50% of that, where we could be looking at doing this again in 3 years. I know that to do that, you have to make a lot of assumptions and you have to make guesses about what's going to happen in the unknown. My career is in demand planning. I lead the demand planning org for one of the bigger companies located in Minneapolis. So I 100% understand the difficulty and how hard it is to make those assumptions. But I just want to understand how we're going to do that and keep our students in mind rather than just shifting them around retroactively and not planning for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Arun Mankani.
Hey, everyone. Before I kick off, I think I really admire the work you have done. I did follow some of the prior plans as well. And today, listening to you and just the group, really, really appreciate the efforts what you guys put through. I'm actually raising one concern around the Tavera community. I know a couple of points have been already touched. I think they answered some of the questions as well. Currently, what I see is Tavera has been mapped to Kimberly Lane, which is a bit farther than Meadow Ridge and Northwoods. I looked at a couple of other plans, what a couple of other board members asked as well. I do see that it's away, proximity to school is far, and then I do see that it impacts school activity and engagements because of the distance. And a couple of other points which were touched, because Tavera is not continuous pocket for Kimberly Lane, do you see in the next rezoning or remapping, this is the first school to be or first community to be remapped? If that is the case, should we even plan for something like this now? Again, you also touched upon a purchase agreement based decisions. If that is the case, should we even consider that now rather than thinking about future growth and then mapping the entire community which is not developed? I think this community is developed less than 50%. And if you're looking at full 100% and then planning, because of that, we are moving into Kimberly Lane. Should we even consider this to be mapped back to Northwood? Again, this is just a train of thoughts, but I really appreciate and admire and also understand the complexities around this. But then, yeah, just this, primarily the concern is around 3 to 5 year planning, because I'm a father of a toddler who is going to join class next year. So yeah, I'm just thinking if it is 5-year plan, if they could accommodate her in a single school rather than multiple schools. But I really appreciate your efforts. Thank you. Good day.
Thank you. Ben Steinbach.
Thank you. Thank you for the thoughtful answers. I'll just start with that. The board members for asking questions that I had on my list, so my time is much shorter. So thank you for that. I'm one of the parents of the 54 fourth graders that's impacted, and that's something my wife have struggled with throughout this. I understand there's macro decisions to be made. I'm here just to share as a parent the micro impacts those have. My son has dealt with anxiety, especially separation anxiety. In second grade, we had to have him ripped out of our car to go into school. And what I love most about our school district is that we have great support systems to help him. We've had counselors in school helping him. The teachers are great. He gives every one of them a hug every morning. So agree, you guys have awesome teachers. And he's worked super hard to get where he's at. I've seen it. He fights and he pushes, and I know he can fight through more. I don't want, as his father, though, to have to ask him to do that again, because he has fought and he's done so much work. So not asking to look at the whole district thing. It's hard. It's like, I don't want other people to be impacted either. I'm just asking for some, and I heard from the board members, extra considerations for those 4th and 5th graders so they don't have so many transitions right in a row. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Keisha Sedlacek? I'm sorry. Correct me, please.
It's Sedlacek.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Keisha Sedlacek. I'm a parent of 2 kids at Northwoods, and I'm a resident of the Weston Ridge neighborhood. I'm not going to repeat everything that was already said with regards to all the comments, and I just want to second Adam's proposal as far as what we should do. I was going to go into capacity issues and the ability for Northwoods to absorb our community, but Adam's addressed that. So instead, I have 2 other points I would like to make. The first being, you know, I've been hearing about the new elementary and middle school that are coming in the near future. The neighbors were actually told that we're being considered for a move anyway during that process, which was confirmed again tonight, that most likely in 3 to 5 years we will be moved over anyway. So I just, in the interest of transparency, would expect that any of those considerations that you all are looking at are actually verbalized and made public. The last point I have here is, while there has been a commitment to providing transition support for families impacted through a guide with tips and resources and now activities, the school district needs to do better and provide resources at new schools for students who have been moved. My child also suffers from severe anxiety, and having recently moved into your school district, I can tell you firsthand the resources are limited through the school as well as the privately available ones in this area. So you're going to need to provide additional staff dedicated to ensuring these tools are given to the students who need additional resources when dealing with a transition. And I'm sorry, calling this a networking exercise to make my student more prepared for college really just is quite is an insult to me. It impacts our students much greater than that. So I hope that you do provide additional resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Derek Schonobrick.
Hi, I'm Derek Schnobrick. I'm one of the many Weston Ridge residents here. And so I don't need to maybe belabor a lot of the points the others are going to make as well, but I appreciate all the work, obviously, that you put into the proposal. I just can't help but feel like, you know, the results kind of speak for themselves. I think I found out even later than many of the other residents here from Weston Ridge. Like, I found out a week ago that this was happening. That's just like not a very transparent process, and I've heard multiple times that was a goal. And so that kind of in combination with some of the hard data that was laid out by others of just, I would really like to hear specifically why Weston Ridge was moved. Like, I emailed all of you and I haven't heard back yet. And so I'd just be really interested to know what some of those factors were, because it does kind of feel like we were that last domino that tipped over. And so I'd like to know why. And similarly as well, I have a kindergartner. And so staring down potentially 2 more moves yet is just really hard to stomach. I'm actually always at a high school grad myself and had to live through several changes, and it was tough. Like, you could tell the kids that had to move versus those that didn't. So I just ask that you really consider all the Weston Ridge people that are here tonight. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Muhammad Khan.
Hi, thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for the presentation as well. I am one of the parent of from the Tavera community, and my kid goes to Northwoods. Our question was around, first, initially for all the 8 concepts which were there, the school which was assigned for Tavera was Northwoods, and all of a sudden we have moved to Kimberly Lane. Now the point which I want to make is, with this particular transition, the kids are a little bit more hesitant towards it. Second thing is, it increases the times. Like, right now the timings are very early for the bus, and now with this particular shift, we will be I'm guessing it will be more earlier as compared to what we have right now. Even for the parents drop off, where it will take 10-15 minutes, it will take probably 20-25 minutes, 30 minutes probably. So want to make up the point. And even and wanted to understand one more thing in terms of when Tavera is on the pocket, the border, there are two more schools here, Northwoods and Meadowridge. What compels us to move Tavera directly from Northwoods and Meadowridge to directly to Kimberly Lane, which is too far as well. So yeah, please consider these points as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Kim.
Thank you for taking my comments. So I'm going to start out that I work in machine learning and data science. So I'm pretty comfortable with numbers. So I look at the numbers of what's being proposed. Chase Anderson and Scott has said, Northwoods have to be protected. We can't bring in Weston Ridge, or we can't bring in any school. It's going to be over. We have 400 homes that have gone up in the last year and a half. But then they cite facts like, well, the ones that are going to be building out is going to take 5 years. What neighborhood in the last 5 years has taken 5 years to grow in Plymouth? They pop up in 2 years. There's more farmland being sold, so we have to protect Northwoods. Well, we can't put Weston Ridge in Northwoods because it's going to be too full. So what we're going to do is just remove one neighborhood to protect Northwoods. That's it. How is it that we have to protect Northwoods by not letting anything in because it's grown leaps and bounds with all the farmland, but not move more kids to the east? It doesn't make sense. I'm not here because I'm anti-move. Move Bon Air, move Weston Ridge, move more neighborhoods east. Because guess what? Greenwood and Northwoods in 2 years are going to be over inundated. We're going to be right back to where we are right now. Think about that. We're moving one neighborhood of 54 kids out of Northwoods, and that's going to solve Northwoods' capacity problem for the next 3 to 5 years? That makes no sense. Also, I am all about data. I love good data. So I did some research on Teamworks. They're made of 12 superintendents and one person on geospatial analysis. One. He has his own internal tool that he built out and uses a third-party data set. So has anyone asked how accurate that is? Has the projections for the next 3 to 5 years in other school districts been validated? Because the numbers they're saying, 400 people growing so quickly, we got to protect Northwoods, we got to protect Greenwoods. Then they remove 1 or 2 neighborhoods. That's it. That doesn't make any sense. We're going to be over inundated. Next is, it's better to move a lot of students at once, not small. Because kids at Northwoods, there's going to be some grades where there's 3 kids moving to Meadow Ridge. They're not going to know anyone. They're going to go to class, and it's going to be foreign to them. It's better to move chunks of neighborhoods east. Bon Air, Weston Ridge, Ravinia. Then at least these kids have familiar faces. They feel comfortable. It might be a different building, but they have their friends. So when you single out these small neighborhoods, those kids are the sacrificial lambs.
Thank you. Adam Webb.
Good evening, school board members. My name is Adam Webb. I'm a father of 4 in the district, and I'm here tonight to implore you to vote no on Concept 9. I understand this process is necessary to facilitate the process of getting funding and approval for new schools, but the whole district is at real risk of being perceived as an unstable place to live and send your kids to school. You have the opportunity to be the board that actually listens to feedback and stops the unnecessary magnitude of student disruption proposed in Concept 9. Concept 9 proposes to move 8.6% of elementary students. I know some people believe this is an improvement from the 20% plus of students who would have been disrupted in previous concepts, but Teamworks openly stated at past board meetings that those concepts were never implementable plans, so those can't be the bar to which Concept 9 is compared to. I disagree with something the earlier presenter said. If the concepts have continually improved over time, why would a few more weeks of time not make them even better? For example, Scott Lesage recently provided me with detailed data breakdown of my neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods, which I appreciated. By making a slight modification to Concept 9, the percentage of disrupted students can be reduced from 8.6% to 7.9%. And that's just looking at the area around my neighborhood. I know further student disruption reductions are possible, which will still arrive at the same facility utilization numbers as Concept 9. The core tenet for being able to do this is to not move fully developed neighborhoods, which should be a goal anyways. So I ask this, were certain principles, such as not moving fully developed neighborhoods, except when opening a new school, fully explored by Teamworks and the design team? Did you receive a detailed explanation on why that's not feasible? If not, you don't have enough data to vote yes, and you should vote no on Concept 9. Now, I want to spend a minute, I only have about a minute left, talk about the, frankly, embarrassing map that's Concept 9. How has no one brought up there's a literal island around the wealthiest neighborhood in the district? Am I taking crazy pills? Does anyone else see this? The wealthiest neighborhood in the district was obviously given preferential treatment as part of this process because it's the only island boundary on the whole map. And to be clear, I'm actually for what the design team did for Hollydale, but I'm adamantly against not giving the same consideration to fully developed neighborhoods such as mine. So I ask you, have you as board members received legal advice that this map can hold up to a legal challenge under the Equal Protection Clause, which ensures equal protection for all citizens and prohibits preferential treatment in government affairs? If not, I recommend you vote no. I know you want to put this process behind you, but this is the most important vote you will ever take as a school board member. I guarantee it. And I know for a fact we can do better than Concept 9. Give it a few more weeks. Send it back to the design team. Tell them, you know, the number needs to be 7%. That's dozens and dozens of kids that will not be disrupted. I know for a fact it can be done. I've spent a lot of time with the maps. Thank you for hearing me. Vote no tonight.
Thank you. Nimantha Manamperi.
Yeah, so my name is Nimantha Manamperi, and I'm also representing the Western Ridge community. And I'm not going to get into the numbers Adam and Kim presented those, but I wanted to actually point out a couple of things. The first one is actually we were not aware of this change at the very last minute. So this is a very last minute change, and I think this was taken to facilitate some of the other neighborhoods which were already moved. I think I received an email from Dr. Anderson before coming to this meeting, and he mentioned that preference was given to like the neighborhoods who have already moved. And those neighborhoods are actually also growing, and especially if you think about Ravinia, it's growing like even to date, like they're building new houses. And our neighborhood is like already established, and those neighborhoods should be given priority. I'm not discriminating anything or like that, but ours was already established, and we should be given, like we were assigned to Northwoods, and we should be kept in that. And the other thing is that, as Valentina, board member, mentioned that there are neighborhoods in the community that who wants to swap. Like for an example, Reserve at Medina, right? They don't want to go to Northwoods. We wanted to go to Northwoods, so why don't you do that swap? And also, I'm really concerned that this Concept 9 should not be final. Because when Valentina asked about whether did you consider like the mentality of those COVID students, like, who went to 4th grade, and they already lost their trust, they already lost, connections with the community and the students. And the answer Dr. Anderson and the other two gentlemen gave, like, they didn't have an answer for those 48 students, and he will think about it. I think that's a very concerning point, because we are grown-ups, we can manage to the change, but you need to really think about how you incorporate these students will manage. Yes, they definitely need to know how to incorporate the change into their life, but this is not the time you should do that. So I think that should be really given the consideration. And also, I know if you even don't make that change at the very last minute, there was like a consideration that the parents can request the same neighborhoods can be, kept in the same classroom or something like that. But even at that time, you should not be thinking about your easiness. You should be thinking about from the student's point of view, and parents should have to have some kind of a procedure or a paperwork to submit to the the school, we have to have a say. Our students need to be grouped together into one classroom. So don't think about your easiness, think about the students and the parents as well. And I think I really appreciate Valentina's really good points about the COVID students and this swapping thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Heidi Spoor?
Hi, I'm Heidi Spory. I am a parent of a fourth grader, current fourth grader, and a current eighth grader. We are Greenwood and West kids. I really appreciated just pointing out that yes, my fourth grader, extremely introverted fourth grader, was a COVID kid. He had to go through that. The thought that he has to spend his fifth grade year in a brand new school at Northwoods, which these people are fighting to stay at. So why are we having to move out of Greenwood? These kids know, our small little neighborhood, that they know. Why do we have to go to Northwoods, which I know is a fabulous school, and just keep us at Greenwood and West, where we know we are small. It is a very, very tiny neighborhood, established 125 homes. I'm just asking that. I don't understand why it is so set that we have to go to Northwoods. I realize that Wild Meadows goes to Northwoods and they're right in front of us. But if this is going to be in 3 to 5 years, we're actually very close to where the potential new middle school would be. I'm asking that we please vote no for this. I feel like maybe this is something that really does need to be looked at more instead of rushed and then, okay, this looks fine when yes, a small number of people are being affected, but these are human beings that this is what they know. And I just ask that we just please say no and maybe just look at it in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the portion of the agenda for public comment. I thank you all for coming tonight. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is administrative reports and recommendations. The item is the attendance area adjustments effective for 2025-2026 school year. And Dr. Anderson, if you could present.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, members of the board. Thanks, members of the community, for coming tonight to share your inputs and insights, as we indicated on the agenda and in our preliminary comments to the board meeting. This is the segment where a recommendation is made to the board and where they'll take a vote on the proposed recommendation. So I'm going to share a little bit here. I'm wondering, Madam Vice Chair, if I may have your permission to not read all of the neighborhood names again, since I read them in the presentation. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. They are in the packet and included in the narrative. During the past several months, Wayzata Public Schools has been engaged in the process of reviewing current attendance areas for elementary and middle schools and creating concepts for possible modifications, effective with the start of the 25-26 school year. Progress updates have been provided to the school board through presentations each month at the school board meeting starting in September of 2024. Feedback has been received from parents and staff during this process and has been considered in the refinement of the evolving concepts. This feedback has come in the form of online input as well as from the input team comprised of parents and staff representatives from every school. The design team, made up of 29 district administrators and employees, has convened numerous times to discuss possible and refine the concepts. Listed on this document are the neighborhoods affected by the recommended boundary changes, and those are the ones I alluded to earlier that I had mentioned in the presentation. We also referenced in that presentation the feeder elementary schools to each one of our 3 middle schools. I shared in that presentation as well the protocols for open enrollment and intra-district transfer, continued enrollment options, grouping students together who have moved to a new school, Wayzata Kids enrollment, and school transition activities. Again, Madam Vice Chair, would you like for me to read through each of those again, which I'm happy to do, if that would be helpful in the recommendation?
I think yes.
Okay, I'll just read them. So for open enrollment at all elementary and secondary buildings will be in accordance with school board adopted protocols and in alignment with state laws. As I'd indicated prior, it's important to note that the district's current open enrollment practices are in alignment with the minimum requirements consistent with Minnesota statutes. When possible, continue with the practice of same building placement of an open enrolled kindergarten student with an older sibling attending Wayzata Public Schools. If a kindergarten sibling is accepted through open enrollment and placed in a building other than the school where the older sibling attends, the parent may choose to keep the older child enrolled at their currently assigned elementary school, or the parent may request that both children be allowed to attend the same school where space is available. Students enrolled in the 2024-25 school year under approved open enrollment agreements will continue attending the same schools as currently enrolled. Open enrolled students moving into sixth grade will attend the middle school that their elementary school is assigned to. Birchview will be the 2025-26 placement for incoming kindergarten students who do not have an older sibling attending Wayzata Public Schools. Intra-district transfer. An intra-district transfer student is defined as a resident student attending a school outside of their district-assigned attendance area school. The district will continue to manage intra-district transfer requests under the current procedure, which requires annual review and approval. Intra-district transfer students may or may not be allowed to remain at their 2024-25 school of attendance, depending on the individual building capacity status in the 2025-26 school year. Continued enrollment options. Sixth grade students of the 24-25 school year attending East Middle School and who also attended Kimberly Lane Elementary School will be allowed to remain at East Middle School through their 8th grade year. Transportation to East Middle School will be provided for these students. Middle school students at East, Central, and West will be allowed to remain at their current school of attendance through their 8th grade year. Transportation will not be provided for students who are assigned to a different middle school through this process if they choose to remain at their current middle school of attendance. A middle school student who was assigned to a different middle school for the 2025-26 school year and who wishes to remain at their current middle school may be able to receive transportation to and from that school from a nearby bus stop for that school. Such an arrangement needs to be coordinated through the transportation department. Further communication will be forthcoming to ensure that each middle school is aware of who will be staying at their current school and who wishes to attend their newly assigned middle school. Younger elementary school siblings of middle school students will not have a choice for continued enrollment. They will need to attend the newly assigned middle school. Students, except for those referenced in the bullet points above, will be expected to attend their assigned school for the 20 school year. Due to space, logistical, and cost constraints, current fourth grade students will not be able to remain at their current schools under these adjustments. Intra-district transfers for other elementary students will also not be available due to space, logistical, and cost constraints. Although not part of the proposal, I'll just reference there was discussion about allowing fourth graders to remain at their elementary school, and we'll have some continued conversation about that. Grouping students together who have moved to a new school. To the degree possible, principals will consider grouping students into the same classroom who have moved to a new school together for the 2025-26 school year. Wayzata Kids enrollment. Registration for Wayzata Kids is based on district participation. Therefore, families' priority status will not be impacted by moving to a different elementary school. School transition activities. School principals and staff working in cooperation with the PTA and PTO and/or PTO will plan and communicate transition activities to help ensure students and families feel welcome and comfortable when they arrive at their new school. New housing development attendance area assignments for 2025 and 26 and beyond. There are several new housing developments evolving in our district. As these housing developments open and new residents move in, the district will evaluate the capacity at the currently assigned schools and determine whether a change to a different school is necessary. If a school is experiencing capacity concerns, students from newly constructed homes may be assigned to another elementary middle school with greater capacity available through an administrative reassignment based on a predetermined signed purchase agreement date. This assignment will remain in place until such time when impacted students can join their neighborhood peers at the same school. The recommended action is to approve the outlined school attendance area changes effective for the 2025-26 school year. And I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Henderson. Board colleagues, the recommended action is to approve the outlined school attendance area changes effective for the 25-26 school year as read by Dr. Anderson. Would the clerk please take a, I'm sorry, is there a motion?
I so move.
Is there a second?
I second.
Would the, is there any discussion?
When we cast our votes, if you will, are we allowed to make comments or just yes or no?
This is the time now.
That's not, okay. So again, just hearing everything, my request would be to again allow at least 2 to 3 weeks, not asking for any significant changes. Nothing might change. We may literally land exactly on Model 9, but just hearing some of the concerns, hearing folks have recently learned about some of the changes. My ask would be to at least take a couple of weeks. And again, I don't know the procedures, but we don't have to wait till 13th of Jan. If we have a way to schedule another special meeting, if that's an option in 2 weeks, I think I would highly recommend that. And again, I'm not setting any expectations that decisions will change, or I'm not asking to, change the whole game plan, but at least take a look at it one last time, and we may literally land on the same model. But my ask would be to at least consider a couple more weeks just to look at, are there any other opportunities to bring that percentage further down?
So Paras, are you asking, Director, are you asking for us to hold the vote? Is that what you're asking?
My recommendation would be to have design team take a couple of weeks. We hold the vote. We come back early next year. Need not be 13. It could be much sooner than that as a special meeting, and then we vote at that time. And again, not setting up any expectations that things will change. We may literally land to exact same model. But I think it's critical that we take time and not rush to the judgment today.
Okay, so board colleagues, is there a motion? No?
There's a current, sorry, Vice Chair, there's a current motion on the table. So if there is a request to amend amend a motion, that also needs to be first and seconded. Otherwise, you can only vote on the motion that's on the table.
Thank you for that clarification. Is there any more discussion?
Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you. Well, I really just did want to take a moment to commend, the community for reaching out for their, effortful engagement, our team at Teamworks and our district partners for really making this process, I think, in my opinion, very strong. We were able to hear and communicate with folks and, hear their needs and what their observations were. I think this was a data-driven process. I'm really grateful to the, team for being able to make our future school program work. I was able to, transition pretty seamlessly from Kimberly Lane to Central Middle School, 5th to 6th grade. It was great. I'm glad we were able to keep that intact. I'm hopeful that the district will be able to take time to, for these, soon to be rising 5th graders to stay at their given building, if there may be consideration for that. So I want to accept and understand that there is a lot that goes into this, while also recognizing that, there are a lot of emotions, feelings around this, and that ultimately, this does have to do with people's children. So, recognizing that, I'm proud of our process, and I will be voting yes.
Sarah?
Yeah, I will acknowledge that I also wondered, can we slow down this process, and do we need to think about this more? And I came to the conclusion that does not seem like the right answer. We are an incredibly large organization that does a lot of things, and there's a lot of pieces in motion, from getting ready to welcome each one of our community's children into an after-school program, to enrolling our kindergartners, to hiring our staff and filling our buildings and making sure that we have the right people. And so we started this process in September. There has been a lot of data, and no process is perfect, but I have a high level of confidence that we have put the effort into this process that we need to put in. Moreover, this is when the real work begins, because we're a student-centered organization, and it's our job to create community. It's our job to educate students. It's our job to support our staff. Our PTOs and PTAs send out incredible invitations and create community. Our principals are the best leaders and ambassadors of their building. Our students are exceptional classmates and neighbors and peers. And so we're human driven. And when we draw the lines of our buildings, because we're not builders, when we draw the lines of our building, then that's when I will say to the administration that the board implores you to get to work and get to work to really make sure that each one of our students feel the exceptional welcome and being part of the Wayzata community that we all know and love. So I as well know that boundary changes and its area adjustments are really, really hard. And every board member considered the individual families and as well, those that we know and those that we don't know, as well as neighborhoods, as well as our schools. And ultimately, no matter how many thoughtful, compassionate, and dedicated leaders give how many nights and days and weekends and conversations and graphs and input sessions, we're not going to find a perfect solution, and that's disappointing. And I hope someday we will. But right now, we have a solution, and we need to get to work in educating our students. I want to thank our administrations. I want to thank the design team and the input team. I want to thank every parent, those of you that have been here for 3 hours tonight, and every single parent that put input in the online and in conversation with a number of people. Our process is stronger and our district is better because of you. My vote tonight, which will also be in support of this, reflects my belief in our community and my commitment as a leader to ensure the long-term prosperity for our district.
Any further discussion, Valentina?
I can see that there is, there is no argument. There is quite a bit of work had been done here, and as I commented that through so many processes, I'm surprised that you remember details. But at the same time, I, especially hearing that particular neighborhood were considered so late and I feel rushed right now. And yes, we are a big district. We need to make decision. We administration, teamworks, organization, and leaders knew about it to begin with. So first of all, I feel I agree with Paris, and I feel like we're being rushed. It would be nice to take a couple more weeks and look through if what else can be done. And second, I would not feel comfortable unless the language about fourth graders is being changed. Then I will feel confident at least that these kiddos had been taken. I would vote no.
Sheila?
I think we should vote on this tonight, so I would like to keep the original motion. This, proposal has been deliberated over for months. It is not perfect, but no proposal will meet everybody's expectations. And somebody will have to be affected no matter what. I think we would be here forever. We could always say, let's extend it. Maybe there's some other solution. It would go on, and it would go on a long time. So I will be supporting the recommended action tonight. I think this proposal balances many competing considerations, and we have a responsibility to do something about our capacity issues before the start of the next school year. So it is pretty urgent that we do this sooner rather than later. I would like to say, though, that to anyone affected, I do want to say that I'm sorry. And I hope things end up being not as bad as you're expecting. As a child, I personally moved 3 times between kindergarten and high school, and I did have high anxiety. And I don't want to minimize the effects, and I don't want to say my experience is going to be everyone else's. But I can say, you know, in hindsight, that the that you know, having to adapt to each new school has had a positive impact on who I am today. I will also say that my own children had to move. Two of them had to move in elementary school, so I know what you're going through. And again, I just hope that the experience, you know, with the teachers and the principals helping that your children's transition will be easy, not easy, well, easier, and that things won't be as bad as you're expecting. And finally, I know maybe we had a commenter say that, you know, think of it as networking, and I don't want to say that, but it's possible that, you know, unexpectedly, that the transitions in elementary school will help with transitions later on, because your student will know more people in middle school. They will know more people in high school. And again, that's not to minimize the actual effects and the actual personal experiences of all the families who are affected. So I appreciate everybody who reached out to us and sent us emails and spoke tonight. And I appreciate all the work and hours that people put in. And I will be supporting this.
Thank you, board colleagues. I am also going to be voting in support of this recommended action, and I echo everything that my board colleagues have said. The input team, the design team, the administrators, the principals, the teachers, the staff, the students, so many inputs have gone into this in consideration of coming up with the best possible solution in an imperfect situation. Again, I want to thank everyone for their inputs. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for continuing to engage with our district as we continue to try to make things better for each and every student. And again, like as Sheila mentioned, we do hope, and I do hope, that your experience is better than what is anticipated. So again, we have a motion on the table to approve the outlined school attendance changes effective for 25-26. We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please take a roll call vote?
Sarah Johansson.
Yes.
Dan Ginestra.
Yes.
Paris Bende.
No.
Sheila Pryor. Yes. Milan Sahoni is absent. Valentina Ayers.
No.
Heidi Cater.
Yes.
It passes. Oh, sorry. Wait, you're not on the list, Sarah. I'm so sorry.
Nope.
I
was first on the list.
Okay.
So the total vote is?
Oh, the total vote is 1, 2, 3, 4 yes, 2 no. We have not had a split vote like that before. I apologize.
The motion passes. That concludes our meeting for tonight. Thank you all for joining us. Is there we need a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second.
Is there a second? Thank you.